What is up, party people? Alright, gonna have a fun one. What's up, Crow? What's up, Mindy Manny? Militant Manny? What's up, Skyfly? What's up, Nicole? Sorry I'm late. uh, what's up, No Name? How you doing, sir? What's up, Circular Reason? You got your wrench. Don't worry about that. I think that's it for now. Hey, what's up, Hannah? Alright, so, like usual, I'm streaming from the Discord, so if you guys want to join that, you're more than welcome to. Let me see here. Got to change some settings, but kind of wanted to have a fun one, kind of see where it goes. I know, was it Jose did his a little bit earlier, and kind of year in review type thing, and that turned into what normally happens when everyone jumps on the panel. But hey, I'm allowing anything goes again. You can try to make it that abnormal shape that does not exist in the real world, but I'll bring it back to science. Don't worry, I know how. But yeah, let's get on the panel. Let me go ahead and see what's up over there. What's up, guys? We're live, just so you know. So how are you guys' New Year's Eve going so far? That's the best part about when you're able to go when you're at work and you're able to not realize you're at work. All right, let me see. I'm trying to get other things arranged, put back in order. Make sure you guys. Yeah, I don't even see us on the Discord. Hang on. There we go. Now everyone can hear you.
So you like my message then, Sean?
Yes, it is true, and I know I'm so at fault of doing so. I try to be on time, but I never am, which kind of makes me not being on time, isn't it?
Yeah, I figure it's kind of like being on Terry's. If you're there 30 minutes late, you're actually 10 minutes early.
Exactly. What makes it worse is I actually do set my my little like what do you call it my little alert that lets me know what time it is so I can be there, and I'm late every time. Trying to get the damn fucking OBS to work. Oh, damn it, really. Alright, here we go. My bad. Fixed it. Alright, should work now. Because no one knows who's talking, and so I'm trying to figure out why it's not working. Someone broke it. It's not my fault. Alright, here we go. So, what I wanted to do is I wanted to talk about our year. Yay! I don't really have much of a change of a year. Luckily, I left Flat Earth before the year started, so we don't have to talk about that. I mean, I did leave the topic of it. Let me go back to the chat so I can see it. I don't know why it's not working. I'll just do it this way. There we go. We'll just do this for now until it starts working. Where is it? Yeah, people, I'm trying to make it bigger. There we go. We'll do that for now. We'll just keep it like that. All right. Like I said, I wanted to go over some things that we had gone over the year and have some fun. You guys got any plans?
Sitting at home with the Mr. Crash and the dogs and not getting pulled over by Illinois State Troopers.
That's a good idea. Because I'm thinking about doing something interesting. I'm thinking about going all the way till New Year's with the live stream.
Wow.
Oh, that'd be pretty epic right there, man.
Yeah, it'll be the longest stream I've done. I'm not really sure how it works. I've actually never gone over 8 hours, so we'll see what happens at the the little part where I had to redo the YouTube part, but we'll see. I don't think it's that difficult to do.
I'm sure you'll have a diverse cast of characters show up in that period.
Well, I plan on playing some different streams that I've had and all that good stuff. I was actually thinking about streaming or playing the first debate I ever had. That was with Gary. That was interesting.
So are we doing your New Year's or our New Year's, or are we going to do it sequentially across the states? Or
Anybody's New Year's that comes across. I just need to know when, because I have a surprise for everyone. I can do this. Well, if you guys are watching the YouTube stream, then you know what I'm doing right now. But I have fireworks.
I can't do, but
I have fireworks for the situation.
awesome.
all night.
So,
Fireworks!
what just happened?
I said fireworks.
Oh, your mic was like just tore up. It was weird.
Yeah, when
I'm
you
just
first
using my
came in.
computer right now.
Okay.
Hey, baby.
Let's see. All right. So, what are you doing for this New Year's, Hannah?
I'm eating pumpkin pie. I have to work tomorrow, so
you got your hands
there
on.
will be
some
no
pumpkin pie finally.
celebrating.
My birthday's in 4 days.
Hey,
Happy
happy early
birthday.
birthday.
That must suck having a birthday so close to Christmas still.
Yeah, doesn't
Yeah.
it? My birthday's on the 4th.
My little sister was the first child born in the state of Alabama that year. She was born on January the 1st, so she got to be in the news.
Do you get like a reward or something cool for that?
I don't know. I'll have to ask my mom. I was in college, so I wasn't really paying it.
You get a newspaper article that your parents can embarrass you with for the rest of your life.
Oh, well, yeah, she still has that.
Oh yeah, I save baby pictures of my son so when he gets his first girlfriend, I can just show them all to her.
That's cruel.
I know.
Cruel
But
and
fun.
unusual
We
punishment.
live to embarrass our children.
Yeah, it's gonna be so. I thought that's what they were for, you know.
Oh, and to get your beer out of the refrigerator.
You gotta get yeah, that too. Well,
And to bring cigarettes to you.
Oh, yeah, that
what
too.
the hell?
Because I could never train a dog to do that for me, but I could train my kid. So, got to be a perk.
Oh, train them to get your beer. I got it.
If I told my son to go get my cigarettes, you know what he'd do? He'd crush them.
Crush 'em. Yep, smart dude.
Kids are turds.
No value of money.
Well, no, we teach our kids that here because we're usually drunk and trying to weld shit together.
Hold this piece of metal. No, you don't need gloves.
Put your hand on the end of this spark plug.
Lesson. We all have our ways of teaching kids, right?
Right? That's how I taught my daughter to check for spark on the lawnmower.
You guys are awful. Child abusers, all of you.
Abusers? No. I think parents that don't use their children like slaves are abusing the system. You know, the system of parenting.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the doctor handed me a rod when my daughter was born. Told me not to spare it.
What did you just say?
So the doctor handed me a rod when my daughter was born and told me not to spare it. Spare the rod, spoil the child. I mean, come on, man. Catch up on the Bible.
Oh, the Bible. Nope. I'm good. No, thank you.
Well, I mean, that also justifies, slavery, making your kids slaves. So I thought it would help you out, help out your cause.
Wait, the Bible says that?
Oh yeah, yeah. Especially if you have a female child, you can pretty much sell them for camels and donkeys and stuff.
What's the value on a boy? What can I get?
It depends on what birth order they are. Like the first one's worth a fortune, but after that they drop in value considerably. I think it's like a I don't know inverse square law. Or,
Well, I only got one,
I'll
so
do-
I can do like a quick sale and be done, right?
yeah, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
You probably get like 10 camels for that.
Hey, kid, pack your shit.
Are you a
Stares
one
at-
and done, Sean?
He's I'm smart.
Oh, I definitely wasn't. My daughter is the result of a drunken one night stand with a stripper when I was a bouncer. So yeah.
Damn.
Wow, that's the
Hopefully,
most romantic
hopefully
story
she's
of the
not
year.
listening to this stream.
Yeah, good grief.
I didn't know I had a daughter for over a year.
That came out of left field. I didn't expect it. It really wasn't.
Now you see what I put up with, Sean.
Mrs. Crash, you are a saint. Just saying. Yeah, you're a saint.
I don't know how you
Yep.
do it.
I guess.
I can just see. I call that the filter. Like
Ow.
I'm assuming Crash just randomly out of nowhere just says shit that no one needs to hear, but he says it anyway. He just randomly just blurts shit out.
That is the definition of his name.
So everyone's all quiet, and he's
The
like,
name.
"I fingered a goat once." It's like, dude, what are you talking about? why you gotta talk like that? I'm not saying Crash had said that, but I could see that be happening. That scenario.
No, that's what you did, Sean, since you brought that specific scenario up.
Nope. You'll never hear me blurt that out. What's up, Lewis? How you doing, sir?
I'm not drunk enough for this.
I may drink later on too. It's gonna be great. As far as I'm concerned, we're just kicking off the festivities. Hi, Lewis. I see you.
Happy New Year. Yep.
Yeah.
Almost.
Hey,
You
Lou.
guys are prematuring New Year's.
For
Happy
real,
New Year's
Sky.
Eve.
There you
Well,
go.
I mean, not in Australia.
What?
But we're not
No.
in Australia.
And they're not time travelers.
Well, yeah, but there could be some Aussies listening in.
Aussies are just upside down Mel Gibson lovers.
I don't get that. Why do you think
I
they love Mel Gibson
maintain
so much?
that they're just British rednecks. But
You ever notice that too? When Crash gets on one subject of something, like he won't leave it for days. For days. Like
No,
right
I'm like
now-
a dog with a bone, bro.
I was gonna say, because right now you're really stuck on upside down and Mel Gibson fans.
I got the Mad Max movies for Christmas.
oh, those are my favorite. Those are so good.
I heard today from a coworker that there is an island that is exactly on the dividing line from one day to the next. So you can just cross the island and have New Year's twice.
That'd be badass.
Oh.
Fancy.
Or your birthday.
Or your birthday.
Yeah.
Halloween.
If you forgot
Really?
your
Any-
girlfriend's birthday, you could easily fix it.
You could fit,
Yeah.
what would it be? You could fit 724 days in a year.
Halloween is not a singular day, no name. It is a year-round holiday.
Fair.
What?
Fair.
Did you just say year round? What?
Yeah. For those of you that are on my Facebook, you know what I'm saying. Is Halloween for my family is year.
Halloween.
Nice.
You get candy.
That sounds horrible.
He scares people year round. Is that what you're saying, Crash?
And I don't go on
Yeah.
Facebook. I think Facebook is
My
worst.
my real name is very close to a famous serial killer from horror movies.
Oh,
Shaq? Seriously, you seen his movies? Horrifying.
yes, pretty bad. It is horrifying.
Just say
From
he has a hockey mask.
Crash's name is Shazam.
Or Wayne
Damn.
Gretzky.
I will forever picture Crash as a 7-foot tall black dude.
What the hell?
What the hell?
Oh, you definitely getting pineapple at your cookout now.
Don't make me drop your food on the ground.
You think it would
Oops.
stop me from eating it?
Stop me
That's
from
what,
eating
that's
it.
what we got a garden. That's what we got a garden hose for.
Oh, jeez. How long does it take to get to your place from civilization? Are there streetlights by your house? I know the rules.
You'll die before you get there. That's how far away it is.
You're supposed to drive down this here one road and you turn left at that there willow tree and you go about until you hear the band goes.
Okay, I know rules. It may not be the same for you, but I've been to Texas and I was told by an old timer, he was like, if you don't see streetlights, it's getting dark, turn around.
I know.
Thank you, sir. Like,
I
"Have a
feel
nice
that
day."
way driving around there too. Out in the country, it's scary.
I live
And
in the middle of the
doing
Great
banjos.
Corn Desert.
What'd you just say? You live in the middle of what?
The Great Corn Desert.
Corn?
Corn. C-O-R-N.
Ooh, you can spell. Oh, I lost
I
that
know.
pool.
That explains why he's so corny.
Or-
I'm just playing Crash. Let's pick on Crash Day.
Oh, I know, but that's seriously what we call it. Because if you look at a satellite map of this area in the fall, that's all you see is golden corn everywhere.
You guys like
You
corn?
really in Texas though?
No, he's not in Texas.
Oh, I was gonna say. I don't see much corn in Texas. Corn balls maybe, but not much corn.
Yeah, I was thinking like southern Indiana or southern Illinois, somewhere in that region.
Pretty damn.
Well, I'm just look at a satellite map and look for where all the corn is.
Oh,
Kansas.
well, that's a big stretch of Iowa, Nebraska.
Now, Crash,
Right here.
Crash,
Here,
and Mrs.
Sean.
Crash. Do you guys hate corn?
Hell no, sweet corn.
I'm just
Oh,
asking,
man.
just because there's so much of it,
No, it's
Hates
just
the field.
It's the corn here is the major way that everybody makes their income. Like there is no big industrialized anything close to me.
Wait. I have a question. Do people actually get lost in cornfields?
Yes.
I don't
It's
live near
quite
any
easy
corn.
to-
I don't live near a cornfield, so I could never have tested this theory.
If a farmer laid their road straight and there's no identifying marks in the field and you got out there and got turned around, you would not know which way is any way unless you could see the stars or the.
So you're saying you need a sextant to navigate a cornfield at night?
Corn.
But it's a big deal when we fly RC airplanes out here and we crash them. We literally have 1,000-foot, 1,000-yard rolls of string at the hangar, so you don't get lost in the cornfield trying to find your plane.
Find your plane? What? Oh,
If you crash your RC
Control
airplane
plane.
out in the
yeah.
cornfield,
Yeah.
we have 1,000-yard rolls of string that you put in the ground at the edge of the cornfield, and you walk out to go find.
Dan dies in cornfield looking for his RC plane.
Did you ever fuck with people who cut the line while they were walking?
I just make my drones drop breadcrumbs. That helps. I just follow the ducks and the pigeons.
I just crashed my drone 10 feet in front of me. I can't lose it.
Sean, if you want to look at where I live, the closest large town to me is Decatur, Illinois. And then you can look at the nothingness that's all around me.
I'm kind of worried about my safety now.
Why?
Wait.
I don't know. Probably
Southern
instincts.
California.
Hey, Sean.
Yes.
How about we come visit you first before you come out here for the cook?
But I'm hungry. And I don't cook.
We need a big barbecue somewhere in the
don't-
middle, so everybody
At
can come.
George's house. I don't want to ride a jet, or what do you call
The
it?
hell in
Snowmobile.
Minnesota.
Oh, we done said we were gonna have one here with about 6 pigs and everything,
Let's do that.
and a
God,
whole lot of pineapple.
Whoa.
Yay, pineapple! I'm coming.
What is wrong with you people? Well, pineapple is good. Let's not get the. I like pineapple. I just don't like jelly on my hot dogs.
Hot dogs?
Yeah. I don't want, like grape jelly. You don't put grape jelly on a hot dog. Same way you don't put pineapple on a pizza.
You do.
It
You just
does
open
want
the
a
can
pizza.
and then put it on there.
Oh, then do you put jelly on your hot dogs?
Oh, that's not the same.
Yes, it is. It doesn't belong. Hello, Carlos. How you doing,
technically, ketchup is just tomato jelly, since tomato is a fruit. Ketchup is just tomato jelly, so therefore, yes, some people do put jelly on their hot dog.
People put ranch on their macaroni and cheese. Now, I think that's gross.
What did you just say?
That's gross.
Carlos, can you give us the throw up? Because that was disgusting.
Wasn't Carlos cute trying to talk smart stuff to Brian?
That guy, okay. I don't like talking too much about people, but I like talking about people. I
don't like talking about people, but I'm going to talk about people for a second here.
That Brian
That's
dude,
why I love Sean so much.
I've talked to him a long time ago. That dude is... Okay, I don't say this much. I hate saying it, but I'm going to say it anyway. That guy's a fucking moron.
Yeah, think?
That guy is a grade checker. I don't think he does surveying. Only because he doesn't even understand the lingo of surveying, and you kind of need to. And he has that like a really aggressive talk before they ask a question, so I don't have to answer a question attitude. I can't stand that shit.
Yep. At least we agree on something.
And he does it bad too. He's not even good at it. It's like someone's like, well, how does the horizon? He's like, I don't give a. I'm not doing this. You guys are so disrespectful. It's like,
you interrupted me while he talks all over everybody.
I swear I heard someone say hi. I think Aaron said something to him, and he was like, "I'll kill you." Like, what the fuck?
I just tried to have a little conversation with Jet Drunk, and man, three words into it, he just starts jumping in.
I can't. That's why I was happy. I was like, I can't do that no more.
Hey, for reals though, we need to do a meetup, man.
For real.
We've been talking about it. We're going to cook here, Carlos. What are you bringing for a side dish?
Well, that's right. When is it?
Whenever someone buys me a ticket.
Is this a separate event from what we're doing out at George's?
What?
Completely.
Let's go on to George's.
Yes. This is a fun event.
Oh, fun event.
There'll be no flat earth talk.
We wouldn't have to talk about flat earth there.
Yeah, Lewis, but we know what you go to meetups for.
George will put up a blackboard and make us all sit down.
Oh, Lewis, come on, man.
Lesson.
You're like my flat earth hero.
There's lots of different reasons to go to a meetup.
But
you found one that you're good at.
we should do a challenge. You have George with a board, and everybody sit down, and the last one to stay sitting down wins $100,000.
The last one stay awake.
No, he's cool, man. He just long-winded.
Yeah, very
Him and Rumpus in the same. Same room.
I'd rather
Sure, that's
listen to
not
Rumpus
government
than
Why?
George.
teachers somewhere.
Hell no, I hate
Right.
listening to Rumpus. George is very drawn out, and it could take an hour for him to say his name, but at least you can understand him. Rumpus goes into that like 14-year-old teenage girl mode where he's just starts dribbling out nonsense. And you
No, I understand what Rumpus.
Hey,
And then
if you
you're
don't,
like,
if you don't
Sean.
understand,
Hey,
hey,
I'm gonna
if
talk
you don't
about- if I'm
understand
gonna talk
Rumpus,
shit,
that's a
Hannah.
personal problem, man.
No, he just starts talking over himself.
No.
Yes,
Rumpus
he
makes.
doesn't. How's he not
Rumpus
talking
is
over
very
himself? He did it
coherent.
today.
He is very coherent.
Huh?
Yep.
Well, you come
Sorry,
from the same
Sean.
you come from the same angry tribe, Lewis.
Same angry
No,
tribe.
Yeah, where you guys like will explain something.
Pure
And then,
gets
like-
the angry tribe.
Oh, Pure, no, he's a leader. Pure is the leader of
Rumpus-
the tribe.
Rumpus does not have the same sort of indignation that I do.
I don't know what that word means.
Well,
So
that's all
I was
means
laughing so
nothing.
hard with Lewis's digs at Brian. Oh my god.
Oh, you were talking to Brian? I would love to hear that. See, that's the thing.
Yesterday, deadpan, just hilarious. And then Jose came and goes, "Now you guys stop laughing." He was feeling sorry.
Oh, okay, yeah,
I was.
I was
Yeah,
there for that. Like I
Jose
thought he was
came
yelling at
in.
me.
I thought he was yelling at me too, but he did. He said everybody except me, which was like, oh, okay, well, all right.
I just let my nerd show in the side chat.
I left the stream, like I was in the on the panel, but I left my microphone, and I came back, and he was like, "Stop laughing." I was like, "What the hell did I just do?" And then I thought he was talking to me because I was laughing my ass off before. I thought it was
Lewis
funny.
was skewering him, and they were so good comebacks that we were just cracking up. It was hard not to. He goes, "Mute your mics if you're going to laugh."
Yeah, I didn't get that part. I was very confused by that
funny.
part.
Yes, Daddy.
Jose sounded super pissed.
But that's the thing, though.
Did.
That's what Jose wants, though, isn't it?
I thought. Well, no. I think Jose actually wants to. I think he wants an environment where people actually learn. I think that's what he wants. I think it's a bit naive of him to think that that's what he's going to get, but I think that's what he's aiming.
Well, he gets pretty close to it, at least.
He does.
But the problem is
he doesn't.
The problem is he still allows the flat earth talk. It's pointless.
Yeah. I think. I mean, I don't know. I guess he does an okay job. There's no one else really doing the same thing he is. So
Well, that's the thing.
he doesn't
would
have.
you rather go to his? Would you rather go to his show or Nathan Oakley?
Yeah, his show.
I'm not saying that anything bad about it. I mean, yeah, he does have the only open panel on YouTube right now. I'm not even an open panel anymore.
I would never in 100 years.
I won't allow
go to Oakley.
Yeah, F that. I won't allow certain people to come on my panel because they don't understand. Don't take it there. And you don't have to. That was the thing when I decided I wasn't doing any flat Earth related topics anymore ever. And people were like, "Well, what are you going to talk about?" Everything you want to talk about. Just don't talk to me like it's the flat Earth, unless you have some scientific backing behind it. There's no point of it at all. Period. We can talk science all day. Every issue they come up with is a science topic that can be talked about. But I'm not entertaining the reality of some bullshit like that anymore. Ever again.
It's pointless. You said this a while ago, Sean. You said that it's an entire system of things that you have to come to understand in order to get yourself out of the flat Earth. And it's for that reason, it's basically impossible to have a coherent conversation with one of them because they're just going to drag the topic all over the place. And if you don't let them drag the topic all over the place, they throw a hissy fit and the conversation turns into an insult match.
They're not there for.
Yeah, but ain't y'all kind of talking about flat Earth right now?
Well, I'm more talking about the argument of it, and I'm not allowing
about it. Yes.
Yeah, I'm not going to entertain it though.
Okay.
Yeah, no. It's just if someone came on the panel like Maxwell used to do it a lot, or certain people come on the panel and they'll instantly bring it to that, and I'm not entertaining it. It's not worth my time. Everything else is science related. If you don't understand it, and that's what I was going to say, Lewis. That's not. They're not there. You don't care. That they're there for the argument, the debate of it. People that want to learn
People are there for
something.
the dumpster fires. Come on, that's what they like to
Yeah.
watch. It
Oh, I can
pulls
tell
in
you
the
right
most
now.
viewers.
Since I stopped entertaining that, my views went down. I don't care.
Oh yeah.
But that's the thing. I'm not doing that. I can't. Day in and day out, the same question, the same answer, the same question, the same answer, the same retard. Fuck that. I'm done. I can see why fucking people get all angry and shit with it. I'm pissed off.
Changes you. Believe me, it does. I've seen person after person that went on the Flat Earth. I don't know if you were around back then, but the Flat Earth debates with Andreas Sensi. Person after person. And Rumpus was around in those days, and he used to be really nice and patient. Trust me, it wasn't always this crazy.
Yeah, it was the same
and
way
after a year or two of doing that, they change. They become bitter.
Brenda's the perfect example. When I first came around is when Brenda started coming around, and she used to come on panels and have a conversation. She'd get pissed off, but how she acts now? Oh no, that was not Brenda. There was a twist, and all of a sudden she just went fuck everything.
I think Tim coming after you.
I think Tim Osman had a good opinion about that. He once said in his videos that both sides need each other. So, and he even called it a scam.
You're not wrong, and he's not wrong about that, because without them, there would have been no show back then either. But there were so many of them coming after you personally, after you as a person, trying to find your information, your docs, and then docs drop you or try to hurt you in real life. It's a pretty scary group.
I agree. He's right with that, what he says.
Hey,
so much
hang on
fun
one
for
second.
me.
Thanks, Soul Survivor. I do appreciate that. Happy New Year's to you too, my friend.
Idiots doxed me, and I ended up in jail for 38 hours.
Okay, well, none of my doxings have ever been that bad, but I've been doxed way more than any of you guys have on different occasions.
That happened back in July, right after I first started doing my live stream.
I don't know about that.
They take it too far.
I have never hidden my past at all, and at that time I was still on probation.
Try to come after you if they figure they can target you and get away with it.
I've had 3 separate addresses, phone numbers. Well, here's the fun part. So they've gotten addresses correct in the past, but every time that they put my phone number and shit out, it was always my old number. So that was always the funny part about that. But yeah, I've been doxed at least 20 different times.
Sean, why is it that we can always hear you smacking loudly, like?
Oh, because I'm an asshole.
He's eating.
Because he's eating
goldfish.
Well, I do know this. A little bit later on, I'll be on camera, and then you can see that I'm not fat Carlos.
Oh, he's not. He's teeny though. He's a tiny dude.
I'm not tiny. I'm 178 pounds, and I am 5'9". That is a very, very athletic build. Thank you.
I got
I'm not a midget.
pounds on you, Sean.
What?
Oh, he's not a midget. He's actually really a handsome dude.
120 pounds on you, bro.
I don't care. All that 120 pounds, I love. Come on, bring it. Bring it.
He's a travel-sized flat earther.
I will kick you in your face, Carlos. And I can, Carlos. Remember that.
Don't worry, I'm family size.
Size.
Carlos is extra fluffy.
Barney was saying in the chat that Brenda was bitter before she came here. No, she really wasn't. Not a couple years ago, she used to be. She was an asshole still, yeah, but nothing like now. And then after the Nathan thing, I can promise you right now, she don't give a fuck about the conversation. She ruined every conversation she could.
What did Nathan do?
It was horrible to her.
Oh man, I'm not sure if you heard it. You need to go look that shit up yourself. I ain't spreading
Yeah,
their
'cause it
drama
was
around.
bad.
It was
Oakley or
disrespectful
Thompson?
beyond. It was somebody else, but it was Oakley's fault. I blame Oakley because it was his stream. But it was.
Okay. Oh,
It's
yeah,
probably on Trolls versus Trolls.
Yeah, it was. It has to be.
Go look it up there.
If it wasn't, it's because it was that bad.
No, it is. I saw it on there.
Yeah. That was actually one of probably the last Nathans I ever saw.
I've never seen a live stream of his. Never. Ever.
I ain't worth the shit. That's for damn sure. I'm sorry. I won't be eating anymore in front of my microphone. I'll mute myself.
I'm still trying to get
quietly.
I'm still trying to get a charity fight with Nathan Thompson.
See, there he goes. It ain't gonna happen. You think that man will ever do that? Really?
You're gonna
show up to
like a twig.
Show up for an ass whooping? I don't think so.
Fight him? That isn't gonna happen.
He keeps bragging about how his new diet. Keeps bragging about how his new diet and stuff's working out with him for him on YouTube. We put it in the ring and find out.
In order to be a fight, he has to have at least some of a chance to hit back.
You would just start talking.
Yeah.
He'd knock you out by talk.
Good afternoon, everybody.
What's up, Circular? How you doing, sir?
Did I hear you eating with your microphone nearby?
It's my stream.
Irony.
It's my stream. You can do that.
The very thing you gave me a hard time.
He eats goldfish with a spoon. Come on.
Anyway,
here's the problem.
I just very quick before go any further.
Sound that way.
Before going any further, just want to wish everyone a happy New Year. It's almost 2020 here.
You too, sir.
Cool.
Wait, it's not almost 2020 there. You got aren't you on the East Coast, or did you go over to the UK? Okay.
No, it's 4:15 here.
Yeah, I thought you had gone back. I know you were planning a trip back over there or something.
I'm planning next year. Yeah, I'm planning on anywhere between May and August is my the goal. Anyway, Nathan did a video. He was playing his guitar. He is going to be in Dallas for an event, and then he's going to be in Atlanta in March. So I hope to be able to interview him again. That'd be cool.
Why is he coming here?
I don't know.
Carlos, where are you at?
I'm like right next to Georgia and Alabama, Auburn.
Yeah.
Oh.
Carlos and I are going to be doing a FaceTime call or a Skype call this year in 2020. Right, Carlos?
Yeah. I don't know who that's going to be worse for, Carlos or you.
No, I know what Carlos looks like. It's going to be hard for Carlos to see my mug.
I know what you
look Carlos, like. I'm in Tuscaloosa.
It's okay. I've seen Sean, and I was able to just.
Sean was a shocker when we did a Skype call. It was shocking. It's like, what?
Yeah, if no one, the people that haven't seen me, and then when they see me, doesn't match, I think.
Voice doesn't match.
Oh, same as Keith.
Yeah.
My bad.
Look,
I can make it match. Here you go. You ready?
Before I saw Sean, I didn't believe in aliens. Then I
saw
Sean,
yo, bitches. Let's do this shit. Let's kick it right.
No, it
I
doesn't
don't
work.
think Nicole's actually ever seen you, Sean.
Yeah, I've seen Sean. He kind of looked like a backup
so not like that.
I wouldn't.
Yeah. Let me pull up an Ebonics log or something if I can read off of that.
You need a voiceover to do that one.
Yeah, but Sean, I know what you look like. You don't look like no gangster. You look like a backup dancer or something.
Stop hating on my sexy. Stop hating on my sexy.
What?
That's funny.
Ain't my fault you were standing. Hey, it's not my fault you were standing behind Britney Spears. That's your thing.
That's a good view. My bad.
Especially early on in her career.
Yeah, end of the career, nah, I'm good. I wouldn't be all confused. I'd be like, is that a dude? Where's the hair?
Yeah, what's she doing with her hair these days?
I don't know. I thought she died years ago. I don't know.
Call me crazy or whatever, but I thought some of her music was actually pretty good.
You're crazy.
Jesus Christ.
You're crazy.
Crazy one more time.
Oh, Lewis. You dropped. Hey,
Oh,
Lewis, go back. You dropped your man card.
Huh.
Who said he had one anyway?
Nice, dude.
You soy milk drinker like Sirius Barry, aren't you?
Soy milk drinker.
You need to eat some meat, bro.
Yeah.
Or
No,
some
soy
rice
milk's
cakes.
disgusting.
It's disgusting. You're right.
Rice cakes are
So
good.
what are y'all discussing today, Mr. Sean?
Man hormones.
No real topic. Any topic, really. You guys can just go off. I'm still in debating on whether or not what I'm doing is going to go through my New Year's and just do a long ass stream or not. I'm not sure yet, but anything's open topic. Anybody want to talk about anything, really? Just leave it off the magical fairy pixie dust stuff.
I just I looked up some pictures of her, and she's old. She's old as fuck.
Really?
Well, she's not actually that old, but she looks old.
Well, she's had a lot of party people in it.
Are the rumors true that Patricia Steele will come back?
Has
Already happened.
a new channel.
What is she doing, though?
Okay.
Like, what topic is she?
I have no idea.
I don't know.
Veganism.
But I'm going to get on her about making her cat a vegan. That's horrid.
Cat vegan.
She has a new hairstyle and more cats. Stay tuned for more Patricia's.
How boring.
Wait, what's the channel?
Name.
It's called Soy Boys Like Cats Too.
Luce has a cat that's all creepy and shit.
You're talking about a cat that is not my cat, Sean. That's just a picture I used one time.
Oh, because that was creepy as shit.
Here, I'll share a picture of my cat. Hang on.
One day, Lewis did a live stream with a cat as his thumbnail, and the cat just stared at me the whole time. I was pissed.
Oh, that was just because of what you had before you went on the show, Sean.
Huh? I'm so confused.
I am too.
She's transgender?
You guys are just lightweights.
Speaking of which, I forgot can't see what the channel.
What about Channel Q?
All right, here's a picture of my cat.
Wow. Does your cat steal all your fucking food, Lewis? What the fuck, dude? Your cat is fucking here.
She's got a tiny little.
I'm so worried about your cat right now.
Yeah, me too.
That cat is packing.
Wow. Can you put that picture up on the stream?
Yeah, I just did. Oh, your cat is. I'm so sorry, kid. I don't even like cats. I feel bad.
That cat's the name is Solomon.
Okay.
Jeez. Has he moved from that spot?
I just found Karen B's. She's put a poster up on the chat. It's how to step into your power in 2020.
You were so lazy, Garfield.
Yeah.
It's Garfield's mentor.
Yeah, really.
I want pasta.
Oh,
hey, so here's Karen B's advice: how to step into your power in 2020. Number 1, learn to be okay with being misunderstood by others. That's the first thing. Oh gosh.
That means
it just
even
goes
though you talk,
yeah,
and they don't understand it, it's their fault.
It's basically there's 7 items, and they're all essentially carry on doing what you're doing because it's right. Number 2 is do things because you want to do them, not because you want to please others. Number 3, let go of the need to manage other people's perceptions of you. That's how it basically is. That's
that.
That's
because she's had
advice for how?
That's because she's had dates with Bigfoot before.
That's just weird.
Is that common? They are all trying to jump on some kind of new age woo-woo.
Oh no.
What is it?
No.
What is
Wait,
the
no.
deal with
It's
Bigfoot?
it's
Nathan Thompson does that.
She has seen Bigfoot near her house.
Gosh.
Bigfoot
Crash,
has
are you
visited her
stalking her?
multiple times.
Yeah, and she can read his mind.
No,
Crash,
I
are you
am not
stalking
talking
Karen
to
B?
Like, it's like the ring of the nebula, and suddenly she can understand birds.
Keep going. I gotta answer a phone call real quick.
So, like, my dogs are that Lewis's kitty would just be a snack for my entirely non-vegan dogs.
What?
Said your kitty would just be a snack for my non-vegan dogs.
Oh, non-vegan dogs. I thought you said vegan dogs.
I know. I was about to say. Well, what are you trying to say?
No, they eat pretty much small game out of the backyard. I'll give them squirrel and rabbit.
So even Lewis is not off the menu then.
Okay.
Hey, what's up, Lewis? How you doing?
Doing all right. Why does everybody always make jokes about me being small and stuff? I'm not that small.
I never do. I just this time.
Yeah, except for just now.
Well, I don't know, Lewis. Maybe because my pit bull's head weighs more than you do.
Dang,
That's pretty unlikely.
It's okay, Lewis.
I don't know. I'm just a big guy and an asshole most of the time. Ask Carlos.
All right.
Brother.
I don't know. I know you guys are just ribbing. I just don't take it very well.
Oh, dude, if we didn't say anything to you, that would mean that we didn't like you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you suck.
I legitimately don't like circular reasoning.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was gonna wish him a happy 2020, but he would find some way to turn it around and say, "You suck, get out of my life." It'd be great 2020 if you were to die.
I don't need to turn it around.
See what I mean?
It's already bad news coming from.
Do you guys hear how Arwin went to saying that the space shuttle wouldn't break the sound barrier? To like, oh well, you have a video. Well, maybe it's pressurized helium.
That's the David Wise theory, right?
Yeah, well, he was saying that it was full of helium. I said, well, how the heck does that thing break the sound barrier and make a sonic
speakers?
Yeah, well, I showed him the footage of the actual cloud, that forms around the front of the rocket. He's like, well, they probably have pressurized helium so they can have structural integrity. I'm like, well, what's the point of pressurizing helium?
That was a good Arwen.
That's right.
This is why flat earthers can never work in my shop ever.
Yeah, well, he was claiming that the reason why it has helium is so it gives it stability. So I guess for the top can stay upright. And I'm going, well, how the heck do they do the whole, rainbow thing where they come back down to the ground? If you have helium on the top, keeping it, steady. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
So does that mean if I put helium in the top half of the roll cage on my mud truck, it'll stay upright and not end up upside down so much?
According to Arwin, even though, filling up the whole external tank only gives you about 1,300 pounds of lift, I mean, I could only imagine what one, booster weighs, but, whatever. It's only to keeping it upright.
I think the disingenuous behavior was when he said that it's digitalized, an actual photo, and when he went off on a total different topics. That is, yeah.
Yep, that's him.
That's just, yeah.
NASA 2020. This flat Earth stuff, and now I've just done it to spite flat earthers who hate them so much. Did I break up?
A little bit.
Anyway, long story short, I bought some NASA pajamas. That's the whole story.
Lewis in NASA pajamas was not an image I needed in my head.
That's fine.
I'm trying to get. I've got a NASA hat and a few other things that I want to make sure that they're visible. It's just for flat Earth.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, well, I don't wear them outside of the house, but I might get some other NASA paraphernalia, and then I think I'll always be able to tell who the morons are by the way they look at me.
Why you gotta be so negative?
What?
Why you gotta be so negative?
It's not negative, it's positive.
Not really sure how it's positive, but okay. I'll take your word
no,
for it.
I think what
I
you
don't know
mean
what you
is
guys are talking about.
I mean, if you wear a NASA something, or you got a picture and there's something NASA in the background, or then someone makes a comment, then you know who you're dealing with.
Yeah. And there's a couple of Freemasons that I've run into in my line of work, dealing with public transportation. I'm always sure to wink at them when I see them.
Are you still getting stalked, Lewis?
Well, if the stalkers are good, I don't know. But with a couple of them, no, I don't believe so. No.
I remember you were being stalked on your bus. It was awesome.
Yeah, she brought me a sandwich.
Did you eat it?
No.
Good. You could be in the basement right now.
I don't trust that woman. Mentally unstable. But I think it was a nice gesture. I don't blame it.
The memories of the year. It's awesome. Actually, that was last year, huh? I think it was. All right, you guys want to talk about a topic now?
Please.
As long as it's not UFC or MMA related, yes.
Damn, you don't know that much, huh?
Right.
You guys watch the show Heroes? Or no, not Heroes. The Boys.
Is it a gay show?
No, it's not gay. It's a superhero TV series produced by Amazon, and it's just a really dark show. Really, really dark.
We can discuss the NASCAR 2020 rules package.
Yeah, if no one's seen the show, there's no point talking about it.
Yeah, sorry.
No, that's fine. It's fine. It's really good
Sounds
show.
right up my alley, though. I enjoy superhero shows. Have you seen The Misfits?
I have not.
Okay. Well, that's another show we shouldn't talk about then.
Yeah.
I'm just waiting for Netflix to release the War for Cybertron.
Oh, I hadn't heard about that.
Okay.
February or March, no name.
Check that out.
Looks like
I still haven't caught up on The Mandalorian yet. So
I've heard good things about that. For example, it's better than all of the films that have been released lately.
That's a low bar.
It is a low bar.
I don't know. The plot's really thin. If you watch an episode of Star Wars: The Clone Wars,
you guys are so dorking out right now.
The plot lines are so much more complex. Mandalorian's very simplistic. That's just an observation. It's good though.
Oh yeah, we're killing Sean talking about nerdy shit. We got to stop, y'all. Sean's gonna go in a shock.
Hey, Lewis, what do you think about climate change?
I think climate change is it's one of those things where it's not something that we're in a position to really, well, this is the way I feel about it. I'm not in a good enough position to deny that it's happening. And it seems like it may be happening. And it's one of those things where by the time it's obvious if it's happening, I'll probably be dead. And so it's kind of a tough, it puts everyone in a tough spot.
Well, I guess we can't argue about that because I feel the same way.
Yeah.
No, it already has influences on us today.
Yeah, but
It's
we
like
can't.
being-
But there's nothing we can do about it right now.
Yeah,
And
it's like being dehydrated. When you're thirsty, you're already dehydrated.
Exactly.
Well, another element to this whole thing is, in order to combat climate change, you basically have to stop using fossil fuels, which is not something that any of the powers in the world is prepared to do, because
I don't think it's about being prepared. I think it's more planned. I don't think they want.
No, it's not just like if everybody just stopped using fossil fuels, I think we would be fine. I think we would basically be able to find other ways to produce energy to survive. But the real issue is that our militaries all run on petroleum. And for that reason, we're not in a position to give them up, because whoever gives it up first is basically surrendering their entire military, and they're opening the floodgates for enemy invasion. Like
there's always going to be an aspect of fossil fuels, and weaning off of it would be a detriment. And you say it's not so much us, but I'm going to tell you right now, it's not going to happen because of all the things we lose as a society. It wouldn't be as cut and dry as that. If we did just stop, yeah, you're right. We'd probably fix a lot. The problem is no one's going to stop. Not to mention, the even bigger aspect of it, in my opinion, is that the government has too much money involved in it.
Louis,
I agree with that.
Louis, that is not an argument. There is artificial possible. So it's not an argument to say that someone is opening up. But even artificial fuel is more environmentally friendly than fossil fuel. But as you surely know, there's also like fuel cells or something. So I think it's a lot of political will to jump to a new way of living.
Yeah,
the abundance of petroleum and the amount of it spread out over the world, to change away from that would basically cripple a country's military. I don't see how you can get.
How about this?
There's plenty of alternative fuel sources, so why would it cripple a world's military? You can make diesel out of anything that's biomass.
Diesel, yeah, but the problem is it's well, for one, it's not economically feasible. It for a small group, yeah, but we're talking. Would be a worldwide thing. It's not just to put it this way: if the United States dropped all fossil fuels, we not like Lewis said, our military would be crippled. 1, 2, our economic structure would be crippled, and it would be a supply and demand thing again. There's not enough.
Well, you wouldn't just do it overnight, would you? You'd phase it out over time.
But that's the thing.
It's not about flipping a switch and turning off the pipe.
Okay, if that's the case, then why aren't we phasing out now? We know we need to.
We are. What do you think electric vehicles are? I mean, there's a lot of cities that are going to electric. And
how do you think those electric?
There are a lot of cities that are already going to electric vehicles for.
How are
well, you can get charged from solar power, hydroelectric power, nuclear
quit
power.
using coal.
That's the whole thing.
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you,
Wait,
Hannah.
the whole thing about electric cars is the variety of sources of power. So you can go solar. There's all sorts of different ways of doing it. When you've got an ICE car, that's it. You've got to power it with fossil fuels. The end.
Yes. Thank you.
So the other part of that, the second part of that is that the internal combustion engine is only about 20%, or I can't remember what the number is. It's very low.
33% efficient. There's
33% of the energy actually propels
heat.
the car. With a electric car, it's more like 80 or more.
Right. the bottom line with electricity, though, is the amount of energy required, and it comes down to time. Our ability to charge and maintain charges to run the vehicles is way too high. It just takes too much time to ensure that you have the energy to push your vehicles along if you're using electric power. We could not.
Only because we don't have the high voltage infrastructure in the U.S. Because if you increase voltage, you cut charge time in half.
Yeah, but then what's going to produce that energy?
Right, exactly. How are you gonna produce that energy?
Nuclear, solar, hydroelectric. There are multiple ways to produce.
It's
okay,
a fuel cell.
Okay,
if we did it with nuclear, I think that would be a good option. Nuclear would be the way to go.
Here's the thing.
Yeah,
you guys
I don't
realize
understand
that you
why
realize
we
that,
haven't put more effort.
Because you do realize that with the amount of power plants that we have now, if you look on the map, we have so many because they're large and they power a lot, but they don't power shit compared to what we need. If you took all those away, the infrastructure of all the, like you were saying, the what do you call it? The hydro plants or whatever you call them. Those
hydroelectric.
Yeah,
hydroelectric.
You can't just plop those everywhere. What about the middle of the fucking country?
No, I mean that's where you do it. You do it where you generate power where it's efficient. So if you got a part of the country where there's not a lot of moving water, well, you have wind turbines, you have nuclear plants. I mean, solar plants. You only put
But see, that's the thing. Even
you wouldn't put you wouldn't put a solar plant up at the North Pole, for instance.
You're right, and even then, California has the largest farms, and solar what we have now couldn't power California. That's the problem.
I'm not arguing that what we have now.
Solar.
I mean, like I said, you gradually phase it in.
But see, here's the thing. You said that they are gradually going away from fossil fuels with electric cars and everything. Now, what if I told you that the solutions that they have for these situations, like, for instance, carbon capture, they're using that to produce more fossil fuels?
I don't agree with carbon capture, but there are alternatives to fossil fuels without completely changing our infrastructure.
Why
isn't the hydrogen fuel cell the best way to go? Turns it back to water?
No, not necessarily.
Still using fossil
fuels. In order to separate the hydrogen from the water, you have to put a huge amount of energy.
There are other ways to produce hydrogen.
For all our equipment up here at the factory, so it works out pretty well for us.
Louis, do you know what gasification?
No, tell me about it.
It's when you, for example, when you burn material, organic material, you get water and carbon dioxide. But when you gasify organic material or waste plastics, then you are burning that with not enough oxygen, just with enough to keep the reaction going. And what that produces is so-called syngas, which means it's a mixture of hydrogen and carbon monoxide. And the carbon monoxide can then be turned into more hydrogen by a reaction called water-gas shift, which means you take steam and react that carbon monoxide to form more hydrogen and carbon dioxide. And you can use that hydrogen to power a fuel cell, for example. But there are other ways and other materials what a fuel cell can work with. One of them is hydrogen. Others are methanol. Some fuel cells can run with methanol. So there are a lot of ways to deal with that and to produce these compounds needed to drive cars, for example.
Would you be able to take the energy from the hydrogen fuel cell that you create with that and run the reaction?
Yeah, a fuel cell produces the current to run a car.
No. To run the gasification reaction.
No, that's not how it works. The gasification
I understand that's not how it works. I understand that's not how it works. Right, I get that that's not how it works. You have to continue adding fuel to this reaction, right?
Oh yeah, sure. Or plastics, waste plastics, for example, can be gasified.
Right. So how do you control that reaction? Do you have to control the heat source to the reaction, or does it just kind of go all on its own? How do you control it?
The amount of oxygen can be used because that generates heat, and that keeps the reaction going. This is just to regulate that so that it's enough to keep it running.
Okay. Well, that sounds great. I don't know if it's possible for us to use that though to create a viable amount of energy to run, the tanks and warships and airplanes.
Yeah, well,
you don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I mean, if you need diesel to run your APCs and tanks and stuff, by all means run those. But for civilian vehicles and all other things that don't need that amount of torque, then you've got electric for that.
Yeah, and there's still the option. There's still the option
but you got to remember that those electrics still have to be powered by a power plant still. Until we get to that function of not needing that's one thing. That's why solar never took off. Solar can't take off because it doesn't have a good enough storage.
Yeah, and Louis, there's still the option to turn that so-called syngas, what I was talking about, into fuel, and the reaction is called Fischer-Tropsch. That was done a lot at the beginning of 20th century.
How does that work exactly?
That uses a catalyst. Iron is used and cobalt is used, but iron is cheaper. Rhenium is used, or was it ruthenium? One of them. I don't remember from the top of my head, but it's more active and but it's more expensive. So many are using iron catalysts, and from these two gases, hydrogen and carbon monoxide, you can produce hydrocarbons, and that is diesel and fuel.
Is that more feasible than separating the hydrogen out of water?
I would say it is, because to separate hydrogen from water, you have to run an electric current through it, and that it has to be a huge electric current, and the amount of hydrogen you get out of it is not very much, considering the amount of energy you have to put into the process. So if all you're doing is burning plastics and things like that, then it seems like that's a good way of generating hydrogen, preferable, because you're not having to put as much energy into it. You're just controlling the amount of oxygen in there in the reaction.
You guys are talking about burning plastics as a solution to fossil fuels.
Well, if you're able, right? Except Sean, the gases that are released from that are contained and turned into fuel.
Oh, okay, I see. Okay, pressure okay, I get it. Have you guys heard of a power system called the molten salt? It's called a molten salt reactor. It's supposed to be like insanely safer than nuclear.
Yes, I heard of that one.
Yeah, some fuel cells are made of running with molten salt, right?
Welcome, Sam.
It just seems to me that any solution to petroleum as an energy source has to be, whatever combination of solutions we have, has to be superior to petroleum, not inferior. And if that's not the case, this shift is not going to be a radical one. It's going to be slow and painful.
I can tell you one thing, Louis. I saw a thing on the F-15 yesterday, and the U.S. Air Force is projecting, with upgrades, it's going to last at least another 50, 60 years. So gasoline-powered machinery in the Army ain't going nowhere soon.
Right, exactly.
How about this one for it?
Isn't the U.S. military the largest consumer of solar power in the United States?
I don't think solar power is enough to equivalent anything of those sorts. They use a lot of equipment that is solar powered, but you're still talking small battery packs that they're carrying, or small packs that they have in their cars or equipment. But how is this for it? we're talking. We know that they're talking about having to need to get lower our use of fossil fuels, get green as they call it. But the problem is I'm not sure if you guys heard. I know a few of you guys did the stream I did a few nights ago, and it was on Antarctica. Not sure if you heard that one, Lewis, but they in 2048 the Antarctic Treaty ends, and there are already countries that are expanding their research stations, and also starting to develop technology that would be able to drill into the ice, deeper into the ice and in the rock cores that they have out there. That to me says fossil fuels ain't going nowhere.
Yeah, that too. Antarctica has a lot of resources underneath all that ice.
And like I said, in 30 years, the treaty's over and it becomes a free-for-all almost.
Yeah. How flat earthers are going to be able to take that and be like, oh, they're all these resources in Antarctica. They're really just going beyond the wall to the lands they're hiding from all of you.
Yep, that's what they'll say. That's the same thing as when 2024 we go back to the moon. Oh, it's CGI. They'll change from why haven't we been back to the moon to why did it take so long to get back to the moon?
Well, that's the thing. I think I had this conversation with George the other night. The idea that because I didn't live through Apollo, I wasn't alive. So for me, understanding how they landed on the moon is where my gripe is at all with it. It's just I don't have the understanding to get how they did all the energy, the detailed aspects of it that got them there and back. But right now is the time when all these people that are denying the moon landings should be fucking knees deep in fucking researching what's going on now, because now they're talking about going back to the moon. And now you can see, what it took and how it takes, what it takes, or the money it takes, and blah, blah, blah. And, come to an actual conclusion, actually being able to have lived through it. Because you don't hear too many people that lived during Apollo denying the moon landing.
Correct.
Sean, you're going to be an old man walking with a cane. You're still not going to be going on the moon.
We'll see. I hope that's the thing. I hope they do, because it'll give me a better understanding and clarity to how the Apollo went.
Yeah, we talked about this the other day. So, presidents have said we're going back to the moon. Okay, but I've not seen any clips of NASA administrators saying we're going back to the moon, because politicians make promises, and a popular, one of the promises amongst many is going back to the moon. Okay, that's okay, fine, that's cool. But the NASA administrators talking about it and then having private enterprise involved, this has never been done before. That's what's going on right now with Elon Musk, with SLS, with Boeing. That's what's going on. So to say that it's not going to happen just because you don't think it happened to begin with, you're going to have to really explain when we start seeing the footage and start seeing the science behind it. You're going to have to really pull stops out and explain to us why this isn't real.
Well, I could tell you,
yeah.
When that happens,
there's
bro,
so much
I'll
more.
be the first one to.
Go ahead, Montreal.
I said, if and when that happens, I'll be the first one. I'll come up here and say I was wrong, I was an idiot, and I made a mistake.
Well,
but until then.
Until then.
You know what's what I'm looking forward to, because that's never going to happen 30 years. They're just going to bring it down the road. What I'm looking forward to is the space hotel. That should happen next year.
That's more likely to happen than
that's where we're going to get our chuck.
I don't think that's going to happen.
I think they've given us their incentive to go to the moon again. Because now, before it was, get to the space race. Now, I mean, it's pretty open. They want to mine the moon, and that's no joke. It's not. There are plenty of companies out there right now that have developed the technology that is planned to do it. No, they're not going to go out there with 1,000 men and start fucking mining the moon. The first phase is doing it with machines. Second phase would be then if we need to get people out there, then we'll have bases built. But they want to do it all AI, with machines and shit like that.
they'll build a conveyor belt from the moon to the Earth.
That
No,
would be
they're not.
so awesome.
They're not. I don't think the plan is to get minerals from the moon back to Earth. That's not the plan. I believe the plan is to get the minerals to construct things there instead of having to schlepp it backwards and forwards. That's my understanding, but I may.
The one that has a way station, if I'm not mistaken.
I mean, what's the point? We've already got minerals on the Earth. What's the point of going a quarter of a billion miles?
Because it's we don't have an abundance of it like the moon does compared. It's
So
unmined.
there's a few advantages to being on the moon. And the first is the solar energy you could gather there is a lot better than you could gather on Earth. Because
see, they wouldn't do that. It'd be cheaper to put
that's
something
where,
it'd be cheaper to put something in geocentric orbit with us.
No. You have the power of the sun to power your stuff on the moon. It takes a lot less energy to build things when you are on the moon, and the structures you can build are much bigger than the structures you can build on Earth. So the raw ingredients for fuel also exist on the moon. So if you could invest in this sort of thing and get it going, it would be worth it. Not to mention just cool to do. And then you could have a better base to launch deeper space or deeper solar system missions from.
Well, isn't that also the guides on interstellar travel being able to do that?
Right. That's all part of it. So
not so much the moon, but
right,
other places.
For distant future science fiction ideas. They're kind of forward thinking. So in the Star Trek universe, the Enterprise is built for what they called Utopia Planatia, which was orbiting Mars. So that type of thing, if we think far into the future, that's where this is going. This what we're doing right now, what we're seeing right now is the very beginning of that process.
Yeah.
Which is very, very cool as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you again, Soul Survivor. Soul Survivor says, if you start transferring significant amounts of material back and forth from Earth and the moon, won't that mess with the tides?
Yes. If you mine the moon and you build great big ships and things like that, then you reduce the mass of the moon. Yeah. Yes, it will. But you'd have to seriously,
it would be
what's the moon
be
way?
thousands of years before that could even be a possibility.
Before we worry about
You're right, Lewis. It wouldn't even pay to bring back those materials on a rocket.
No.
Right. Yeah. That's not the idea. I think I don't know how plausible this idea is, but if you could put something out there that could join up with a meteor or an asteroid, and you could put it in an orbit around the Earth and then mine it there, I think that would be interesting. I
know Japan's landed on a couple asteroids to find out what minerals it has on it and stuff like that. And if the idea is if they can get on the asteroid, then they could mine the asteroid.
Right. I don't know how it wouldn't be useful to bring the stuff back down to Earth because, like we already said,
if it's from an asteroid, it would. Because asteroids, we're talking actual jewels and not jewels, but diamonds and shit. Like that's how much pressure and.
Yeah, for some minerals, I think it makes sense because the Earth is rather low in iridium, and asteroids it's more abundant in asteroids.
Oh, okay. All right.
I can't see how this could be financially feasible unless you're mining diamonds or something.
Well, I mean, they've estimated some of the worth of these asteroids to be in the trillions of dollars. So I don't really know how that's not.
Yeah, but think of the launch weight of the vehicle that has to go collect them, and it doesn't make sense. I mean, it costs how much per pound to launch something in space?
Say you spent $10 billion to launch something to an asteroid so you could net it and bring it close to like a Lagrange point so you could have like a good place to mine it, and you got $1 trillion out of it. That's money well spent right there. I mean, that's a good investment.
You're not going to get $1 trillion.
Wrong of the mission, yeah, you might.
So I'm sharing on
Yeah, I
the
mean,
YouTube. If you guys
was it
click that, you got,
economically viable back in the 14th century to send ships back and forth from Europe to North America? No.
yeah,
It is
yeah, it was.
nowadays, though.
Why wasn't it then?
In the 14th century?
Yeah, why wasn't it? That why did they do it?
Well, you're talking the 1300s. Well, for one thing, they were too busy building boats so they could go on the Crusades and stuff, and then they didn't know it was here was another big part of it. But then the amount of material and men that you had to put into that process back then versus today. I mean, you know how many men are on an oil tanker? You got like five dudes.
I didn't realize you were comparing the two, but back then it was just as feasible as it is today for us to do what we're doing.
I said economically feasible, and that's the point, is that it was the same kind of mentality back then, thinking, well, it's never going to pay off, it's never going to be worth it. But I mean, once you establish a foothold and you repeat that process a few times, it becomes easier and cheaper every time, and eventually you just look back and you go, ha, that was easy. Why did we ever think that was hard or expensive?
That's why it's really good that we have, to be honest, not to oversell it with SpaceX and everything, but a visionary like Elon Musk, who just says, who just doesn't accept the people's ideas of limitations. I think we need more guys like that, more guys like
Jeff Bezos.
It's like billions and billions of dollars.
Branson. Yeah.
It really helps that Elon Musk also founded PayPal before he went on this vision.
It really does.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay,
but
so
instead of sitting on his hiney, he did something. And they said, if you watch some of the documentaries, when they first came out with the Roadster, they said, "Oh, it's never going to work. No, people are not going to spend $130,000 on a toy." And they just kept beating him down and kept beating him down. Very, very interesting to look at what he's accomplished. And if we have people like that, and people like that inspire, that's the thing about guys like Musk, is they inspire people to be like him and to think like him.
All right, so if you guys hit that link, the live link on Discord, I'm showing people on the YouTube right now. I found a illustration of basically the high value asteroid materials that are on it, and I'm not reading them all, so I just wanted you guys to see it. You guys.
Well, I mean, just the fact that some of those asteroids are pretty much mostly ice, right? If you're doing a deep space mining operation, I think it costs something like $10,000 a pound right now to launch water into space, and so if you could mine that water from an asteroid, even if it costs you $1,000 a pound. Once you've got it all broken down and everything, that's still an order of magnitude lower than what it costs you to lift it out of the Earth's gravity well. So if we're going to be doing,
for real.
Well, yeah, it's expensive, but relatively cheap. I mean, you got to have it. I mean, if you're working in space, you got to have it. We can't dehydrate water, so you pretty much need water to function. So if you don't have that, is there a limit? I mean, is there a price tag that you wouldn't pay if you were in space and you needed water?
Well, yeah, there's water on Mars, right?
That's a good point. A lot of these resources can just be used by stuff we already have in space and save us money in that way.
Yeah. The second one on here, it says industrial metals to construct and stability service space platforms. That's basically exactly what you were saying, Lewis. They would use whatever they mined off the asteroid to build structures in space rather than launch it up there or bring it back.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Why would you go through all that effort to get it out of your gravity well when it's just floating around for free in space?
It kind of changes. You have to think in a whole different way, building in a zero-G environment rather than what we're typically used to building the way we build here. So they'd have to engineer, not entirely new technology, but significantly different technology.
And they'd have to build that far enough out that the mass of that object isn't. See, wouldn't they have to take that into account too? I mean, obviously, we're not building another Earth, but At what size would it be a situation where if it's in between the moon and Earth, we're fucked? It's gonna come down on us.
No, I don't think that would really be that big of an issue. A lot of these asteroids are not going to be big enough where it's going to disrupt the orbits of the Earth or the moon significantly that we create instances.
I meant more like the structures that they would build, but that's even better.
No.
Would they try to bring asteroids closer?
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. You would. The advantage of the asteroid is that you could move its position. You could alter its trajectory to put it closer to whatever it is you wanted to use the resources on it for.
So then we're talking human error now. You know, you send one a certain degree in the wrong direction, left more than right. You're talking something that could actually come to Earth.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's possible, but I mean, that would also require a whole lot more energy and effort to do that. Why wouldn't you just kind of nudge it into a Lagrange?
Oh no, I'm not saying on purpose. I'm saying an F up, because F up of that magnitude would be a lot different.
You'd have to F up pretty catastrophically to get it, motoring toward.
Hey, trust me. I'm not sure if you knew it or not, but things fly by Earth every day that they don't even see.
Oh, sure. But I mean, you're talking at rates of like, thousands of miles per hour. I mean, you've got a fairly, low speed object. You're going to have to put a lot of energy in it to get it to course correct and come to Earth. So I mean, it'd be like saying, what if we accidentally sped up an 18-wheeler to go 1,000 miles an hour and then it crashed in your building? It's like, well, how much effort would it take to get that 18-wheeler going 1,000 miles per hour? The thing
is it wouldn't take that much effort. It would take extreme less effort to do that. It doesn't take much to take an asteroid off its course.
That is a significant concern. Yeah. What if you in the process of trying to get it into an orbit around the Earth, you go a little bit too far and you get on a collision course with Earth? That could happen. Yeah.
Yeah. That's
well, I mean, that's why I'm saying nobody's talking about putting it around Earth. They're talking about putting them in Lagrange points.
Oh, that's still.
But it's still
around the Earth.
Yeah, that
would still be an orbit around Earth.
Yeah, they're not going to
really far out.
But see, they're not going to do any of these things a million miles out. They're going to bring it close enough that they can still get astronauts there and back if they need to. It's going to be a spot where
now we're going to screw up the universe too.
Yeah,
bad enough we screwed up our planet. We're going to go fuck up the universe.
And for a long time,
oh yeah, they're going to do that for sure.
Our solar system, I should say.
I thought that's what the space idea, everything going on now was about. It was like, well, what if they fucked up climate so much that they know we won't be able to support life in 1,000 years? And now they're trying to. That's a possibility too, though. I mean, that is complete bullshit out of my mouth and nothing back in it really at all. But I mean, what would you do?
Have a comet by the tail.
Well, didn't we know like Venus was Earth-like at some point, and then it got too close, or something like that? But we know places had.
That's a theory. It could be true.
Yeah, but that's what I mean, though. But how did they could know Earth's on its way that way, and now they're trying to figure out the next planet to jump.
Well,
it sounds crazy.
Venus is not Earth-like.
Well, I know that, man. I know.
Such a temperature. I don't know,
but I'm talking millions and millions.
Ice you get out of space isn't going to be drinkable. We'll have to figure out how to purify it.
Well, it says portable it says portable water radiation shielding. I don't know what that means. That doesn't sound good though.
Water is a good shielding for radiation.
Probably radioactive. Good grief! Y'all going to be glowing.
I mean, we can't know this until we get the water off the asteroid. But my suspicion is that it would be fairly trivial to make the water on asteroids drinkable.
The thing is getting to the asteroid and bringing them back. You guys are talking fantastical things like 100, 200 years, if possible, in the future.
No, Japan's landed rovers on them.
That's not that.
Most ideas start out that way.
Yeah, it's not that fantastical. It's something that is possible. It's not something that we're at a even close to being able to do now.
Wait,
and we haven't even tried to.
That's not true. Japan has put rovers on an asteroid.
Right, but it's a whole nother thing to create a craft that's big enough to change the orbit of an asteroid?
Nuclear blast.
Correct.
I wouldn't
It's not
wanna-
far. It's not far fetched. It's not far fetched.
No, it is. It is, because you
Why?
want something that's a whole lot more precise than a nuclear blast.
They can be pretty precise. So that's also the aspect of if an asteroid was coming in our direction, that would be a viable way of taking it off course. And it sounds like movie shit because it's been a movie, but this is real shit they have thought about.
Sean, that theory's been killed because you can break it up into larger pieces and then you have 10, 20 projectiles coming
But if you hit it at the right spot with the right amount of energy, it doesn't do that. It will break, but it will also take it off its course.
If is the question, yeah.
If 100%. I don't know shit about blowing up asteroids. And you're right. It is far fetched, but it has been talked about, and that's more feasible. I'd rather pay taxes into a anti-asteroid space force than a fucking alien space force looking for aliens and shit. And the government's putting a shit ton of money into that right now.
I think
he has a good idea in the chat. Paint one on the side. He says white.
That'd take too long. That'd take way too long.
I recently checked that there's a rather lot of objects which are being observed by NASA as somewhat dangerous.
I think that asteroid passed by us at like 10,000 miles or some shit like that, and that sounds like a lot, but from what they said, that's like crazy close.
Yeah, it is. That's only like a little more than the diameter of the Earth.
I'm trying to find that article.
What is the diameter of the Earth? It's like 7,000 miles or something.
Something like that.
That's the radius, 6,000.
The radius is 6,000?
I'm thinking.
Okay, so it said Earth had, and this is from July. It says Earth had a close encounter this morning with an asteroid. 2019 OK sped by at 122 mountain time or some shit at a speed of nearly 55,000 miles an hour, and that zipped between the Earth and the Moon. I'm pulling or if you guys are in the Discord, you can see it right now. If you hit the live part. Yeah, it says a large asteroid just zipped between Earth and the Moon. Let's see how close it was. It said the closest it came to Earth was just under 45,000 miles. It says a safe distance. Yes, it's a safe distance, but still much less than the distance between the Earth and the Moon, which basically means, in what I'm reading, that the Earth gravitational pull had more of an influence on it than the Moon, and 45,000 miles is close as shit.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty close.
It's very close.
How big was it? Did they say?
It says from its orbit, its size, which was between 187 to 426 feet across. So, I mean, if it would have hit Earth, it would have been everyone would have known. It would have been a sizable earthquake. I'm trying to find this GIF kind of shows it. I'm trying to make it bigger. That's the path it took. And that also means that asteroid's coming back, doesn't it?
Well, it looks like it's in a polar, well, not a polar orbit, but its orbital plane is almost perpendicular to ours. So I think it's the likelihood that it will come back and hit us is extremely low. If the planes were aligned, it would be more likely.
Okay, I see what you're saying, yeah. Damn, that's crazy. Yeah, that's really close. That's not even funny close. But I know it's so impossible. I don't know how it's impossible. How can you imagine? That's the other thing with the whole God conversation. God created everything, but he couldn't have created a space.
Oh.
No, God is anti-space. Everybody knows that.
That's funny for someone who doesn't like space. He sure hasn't been around in a while.
I think going after asteroids is a much better and potentially, just better all around than the space hotel idea. Like the only possible way you're going to make money with the space hotel is because rich people want to know what it's like to be in space, which is cool.
They're going to make a lot of money with that shit.
Yeah, there's a lot of rich people out there, and I'm sure there are going to be a lot of rich people. Okay, good grief. Yes, that's technically true.
So what? I don't get it. When he said that about that space hotel, I saw that it looked like a big Ferris wheel thing. I'm like, why?
Yeah, I don't personally. I don't get it either.
I have a very nice atmosphere here already. Why would you want to go up there?
Well, it just gives it would be cool to do. It would just be cool to do.
Okay.
I think,
and eventually those rich people are going to drive down the cost of all that stuff. That's how technology has always worked. I mean, the first computers were set up to where only the fabulously wealthy could afford them.
And with cell phones, and yeah, you're right. No name. That's very true.
So I mean, if you look at the trajectory of the cost of technology over the past 100 years, you'll see that anything that was super duper expensive 20, 30 years ago is now just in common use by.
Yeah, 65-inch televisions, $400.
Yeah, right.
Now, what else is going to be great about this space hotel is that all the rich people are going to be able to take pictures of space, and then the flat earthers are going to have to deal with that too.
Shut up.
No, they're not going to shut up. They're going to think
that's
these
not
are
data, though.
Yeah,
It's only data when Travis does it, right?
Oh.
He does it.
That's just another group of people who have been bought out by the Freemasons. Some more actronauts.
Actronauts. Oh, that's cute.
Yeah, you haven't seen those
like
memes?
That. They're just LARPers anyway, so blah.
Yeah.
I don't get that.
But, unfortunately, we have so much affluence in the world that I bet a company could make a profit on that just selling this luxurious experience to rich people, which it wouldn't even be that fun. It wouldn't even be that enjoyable.
You know what I say? I say let the rich people be our guinea pigs.
Yeah, exactly. That too. It's a pretty risky endeavor.
That's the least they can do.
I kind of agree. It would be sort of noble of them.
And then when enough shit goes down, the prices will plummet, and then it'll be affordable.
I'll put my neck out on the line. I'm gonna make the first New Year's prediction. You ain't gonna see the space hotel in 2020. Ain't gonna happen.
I agree. No, I don't think we will either.
You win with that.
I think they're gonna have a try. Will we know about it? That will be the toss-up. Because supposedly, and here's what makes it really shady. So, Virgin Galactica is pretty much the leader for this to happen right now. People don't realize this. Virgin Galactica has been around for a couple decades now, and they've made attempts to do this. Not only have they made attempts, but I think it was, what year was it?
Meow.
I think it was 2013, maybe. I forget when it was, but they had a test launch that crashed, and then they kind of disappeared. It was like 10 years ago, I think. They've made attempts to go there to the point where there has supposedly been people that have done this before. There's a guy, and this is where it gets real stupid. And this is all Virgin Galactica shit too, which you won't find unless you go to like the Time Warp or whatever the fuck it is webpage where you can go to old links. They have claimed in the past that they've had they call them missions, a orbit around the moon and back. And they claim some rich people, like rich guys did this. And this was like a decade ago.
Wait, I stopped listening halfway through that. Sorry, I was looking at something.
I was looking up prizes for tickets on the Vomit Comet, but
you guys are assholes.
Start over.
No. So were you saying that Virgin Galactic said they had a mission around the moon?
Yeah, they said there were 3 things you could get: a mission around the moon, low space orbit, or like deep, or I don't even know what it's called, but it was 3 different things, and they had supposedly already done them. And I searched my ass off because you would think when these rich motherfuckers had done that, they would talk about it, but I couldn't find any.
Yeah.
If they send Nathan Thompson out of the galaxy, would that make him Virgin Galactic? This is joke.
Carlos.
It's a good joke.
Did you get that from Brian?
I should have said Lewis, but I like Lewis.
Okay. I appreciate that.
He's going.
But Sean, we were just talking about how only the rich would do it.
Uh-huh.
Would you pay $5,000 for a 90-minute?
Hell no.
5,000
up to space.
Well, people no. I'm talking about just a regular, a flight on the Vomit Comet costs about $5,000.
No.
And it's 90 minutes long, and they do these 15 of these 30-second parabolic descents where you're weightless for about 30 seconds, and people line up to pay $5,000 a ticket to go on these things. So that tells me that rich people will definitely pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to say that they stayed at a space.
Check this out.
Yeah.
You can go bungee jumping or skydiving for less than $300.
Yeah, but you can make a cool Instagram story with it.
You can't what?
You can make a cool Instagram story with that.
Why not? You ever been bungee jumping or skydiving?
I have jumped out of the truck without taking my seatbelt off. I guess.
Wait, what did you just say? Did you say you jumped out of a truck without taking your seatbelt off?
I tried, but then I forgot and just jerked.
Was the car moving?
I'm a fat guy. I have no business jumping out of a perfectly good flyable aircraft.
You can make great Instagram stories out of skydiving or bungee jumping, but I think
That'd be as cool as being in space. Then.
Yeah,
how about this?
The point is
pissed
you
off?
set the bar pretty low by mentioning Instagram.
Wouldn't you be pretty pissed off if you spent that kind of money going to space and when you got back no one gave a fuck or called you a liar?
Exactly.
That would piss me off.
I tell you how they'll get it popular when they have people like Jay-Z and Beyonce up there for music videos, and then next thing you know, everybody's going to be lining up to do it. That's my
guys. And then they'll have the first pornographic movie in 0G.
Oh, now you're talking my language.
That would be bad.
Oh, a monographic movie.
you know, they're gonna be all over that. Well, I want to see that.
Yeah, right until you finish and you're dodging stuff.
I think that's right. I don't think people would really want to see that.
Nope.
You obviously haven't been on the internet.
They'd be like thrust one and then like they just fall apart from each other. Take 20 minutes to get back to each other.
You don't have to like describe it now.
You guys heard of the Mile High Club?
Yeah, of course.
Then there's the Moon High Club.
Yeah. I guess it was a matter of time before somebody made that joke.
This is why we're not going to the moon. Because every astronaut's thinking the same thing. So when are we going to be able to like, do stuff in these suits, yo? I'm sorry, I'm going to tell you right now. I don't care what anyone says. I know for a fact NASA has had to have done sex studies in space.
Oh, yeah, they did. Yeah, there was a couple, a married couple that did.
Really?
No.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
I can probably find it.
How did it go?
A video? I'll get kicked
I
off
have
YouTube
no idea
to watch
if
that.
videoed it.
How do you know it happened, Lewis?
Drop me a
It was talked about on the ISS.
They talked about
I
it on the
believe.
ISS.
I believe they did.
We're not talking about beliefs. I don't have beliefs. I don't know who told you that. Who told you I have beliefs?
Oh shit!
Did you read that in a book?
Now you're
Hey,
looking
what's up,
for
Blue?
Hey guys.
We were just talking about sex stuff in space.
I could have. I'm looking it up, and it basically everything I see is telling me no, they haven't. But maybe I'm just misremembering it. But I could have sworn that.
Were you watching Pornhub the other night?
It wasn't a married couple.
Is that where you saw the
Can
article?
you be more specific?
Guys, it wasn't a married couple. It was a dude and his cousin. But it was okay because they were from Alabama.
Roll that.
Seriously.
Did Lewis
Carlos, did you know that there's 3 of us on the panel that are from Alabama?
Oh, yeah. Blue Marble, you, and...
I lived there for 5 years, so kiss my white ass.
That's right. Yeah. Crash is heck.
All right, congratulations, guys.
Let the Alabamification of the globe begin.
So in 2008, they did a study. But it was definitely in, like, it looks like it was in the, what do you call it, the vomit comment or something.
Oh, that's what it was. Okay.
I mean, 30 seconds doesn't seem like it'd be near long enough.
What were they investigating? What did they want to know? How far he was going to send her?
It says the 2-suit test in microgravity on the universe series Sex in Space. And they're in a vomit comment right now.
Okay, it says sex in space as a human sex in space is human sexual activity in the weightlessness of outer space. It presents difficulties for the performance of most sexual activities due to Newton's third law. According to the law, if the couple remain attached, their movements counter each
I am 12. That's
As of 2009, with NASA planning long-term missions for lunar settlement with goals to explore and colonize space, the traffic has taken a respected place in life science.
all I can say is that you don't need any testing. There's always a way.
Especially when you're Mexican, huh, Carlos?
Yeah!
Strap it to the wall.
Build a wall. I'll jump it. Or hump it.
All right. Well, they're saying the connection's gone bad for your stream. It's buffering.
Nobody watching
2 pictures. I want to know how
I'll change some things around.
those make me.
See, that's the thing. I don't understand how this happens where my connection goes bad because I'm literally on Ethernet cable. Doesn't make sense.
Well, it might have to do with your upload settings on OBS.
That's why I'm changing them around right now. Trying to see if I can get them to pan out. I think what it is my hang on, it may be my background. Let me turn that off, see if that helps. Because like when you run like I have an animated background, it uses a lot of the CPU and it starts lagging shit out. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
I turned it off. So.
If you pull the little ball out of your mouth and clean the ball, it'll work better.
No one's asking you to take the balls out of your mouth, Carlos. It's okay.
How much RAM you got, John?
8 gigabytes.
That's more than enough.
No, but see, it's more than enough to live stream, but it's not more than enough to what I try because I also run off. I have 5 monitors too, and I got it. So once I start getting things going, and I have different things going on, it starts slowing my computer down. I need to upgrade. I'm in upgrade mode right now. I've had this computer for about a year and a half now. How kind is it? I couldn't even tell you. It's 100% custom built.
This would be so weird, like trying to have sex on the Vomit Comet, because you got this crew of people around you just watching you.
No,
he must have.
Aww. Do you get shy, Lewis?
Oh well, maybe I do. I don't know. It's not about. You got a crowd of fucking people, man.
It's no different than being in the middle of the mud bog at Trucks Gone Wild.
Word.
Corrupt.
Why would you want to?
I wouldn't want to do that in front of a bunch of people.
Oh, Lewis.
That's not for them. It's not for them,
the
Sean.
Vomit Comet for a reason.
Sean G says he's going to use the stripper pole in the back of the mud truck next year.
Damn right I will. Mm-hmm.
I don't have to do that to be able to make people vomit. I just take my shirt off and everybody goes.
That's not my goal. My goal is not to make people vomit.
Trust me, it'll happen if you use that stripper pole, Sean.
I'm not sure if that hurts my feelings or not.
What?
Just remember, Sean, if you're on the stripper pole and I drop the hammer on that truck, to hold on tight.
Oh, I will. I just want to announce that Slick has made an announcement in the chat that I think everyone should hear. Slick James Johnson says, "Everyone has beliefs. Get with the programming." Did he just say he has beliefs?
I think so. I think he made a concession there.
That's what I see.
Well, he is part of everyone.
I was just going to say that. No name, never mind. Carry on.
Sorry, babe. We think too much alike.
Well, it is the new year. Perhaps he's making some resolutions of his own.
Do you guys have resolutions?
Well, she made that statement. I can't see it.
This was in the chat.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. It's in the YouTube chat at 2:29.
Oh, okay.
Busted Slick.
I believe.
He says everyone has beliefs. Get with the programming. What's up, Chris? How you doing, sir?
Hello.
There he is.
Can we have a hashtag corrupt Chris too, Sean?
No. Let's keep it down.
That's totally how.
Yeah, we can't corrupt him.
I'm at the grocery store. Oh, here we go.
Chris, will you also be Virgin Galactic if you go outside of the galaxy?
He has a kid. How's that?
Carlos is real low.
He's trying to talk shit, but he's not funny.
Talking about soy milk or something?
Yeah, he's not a very good shit talker.
He said, did he call you soy milk or something?
I really don't even know how that got started. The soy milk, saying I'm a soy milk guy or something?
I'll tell you when it got started.
He said to drink soy milk.
Let me answer. It got started whenever you went on camera for the first time. I said, "Oh, he's a soy boy."
Yeah, you do have that.
Why? Because I'm white.
You have that cute Texas comb over thing going. You know, that make
thing.
Yes, a little bit.
Look, by the looks of you, it looks like you have very soft hands. I don't know. It just looks like you don't do anything.
That's a weird look. Yeah, I have soft hands until I get you on the mat.
Ooh.
Then I get
Should I be
strong.
scared or aroused?
For you, probably both.
A little bit of both.
See, that's why I love Chris.
Every time I've been wrestling with a dude and I get a kind of a chub, I'm like, does this make me gay? I mean, really?
Yes.
Chris, you're one of my favorite flat earthers. I love you, man.
Chris is not a flat earther.
Listen, we're all just having a little fun, right? We take it too seriously at times. I do. We all do. But look, at the end of the day, we're all humans. We're all just having fun with it.
At the end of the day, you're
suffering. You might be suffering. I'm sure your wife is really suffering.
I never asked you that.
Either my volume is low or they're all low.
Chris, I've never asked you that question. How does your wife feel about flat Earth?
She is fine with it in terms of like she doesn't care.
She's supportive.
Hell no,
She's
she ain't. She don't
supportive.
give up.
She went to the Flat Earth conference with me.
Really?
Yeah, when I went the first day, I went the second day without her. She was working, but the first day she went with me, and she met Nathan Thompson, and she met George Natchik. She
Hate your
couple
wife?
other people.
I just for some reason I imagine your wife being like someone who's like, flat Earth is stupid. I don't know why you
she
do that,
doesn't.
Chris.
She doesn't believe the Earth is flat. But check this out. She's way into conspiracy theories. Like she's into Bigfoot. She's into QAnon. She's into UFOs, aliens, and all that stuff.
Chris, you were in the 9/11 way before flat Earth, right?
Sean, but she married Chris. Obviously, she doesn't have good judgment. I mean,
I don't know. Maybe she likes feminine men.
Nothing wrong with feminine men. Come on.
I'm just kidding.
Yes, they're not
Even Chris just
masculine.
said you
I
were
know.
joking around. And I can choke Chris out,
No.
so I can talk all the shit I want.
Well, but here's the thing. So she's not really into flat Earth, but I'm not really into like QAnon and Bigfoot and UFOs. So it kind of works out because she does her own conspiracy thing, and I do my own conspiracy thing.
So you both just stare at each
But we
other and
both-
go, "What the hell is wrong with you?"
Pretty much. Well,
Oh, we
she got
can't
mad.
argue
She got
with that.
mad because after I got into flat Earth, I was like, "Oh, fuck aliens and fuck space." She's like, "Excuse me." And so I was like, "Yeah." I was like, "Well, we're probably enclosed in some sort of dome or apparatus." I was like, "Are aliens likely coming from below or really far away, or they're not coming from outer space?" And she like lost her shit.
That's awesome.
Oh my
House
god.
divided.
That's definitely a buzz.
The house
It is.
divided. I like it.
Oh, breaker.
Got a half a pizza on one side of the bumper sticker and half of what, like a UFO on the other side.
At least he's doing his ground.
At least we just fight about pineapple on pizza, huh?
That's not.
You know what, babe? And like I said, half of that pizza is yours, and it can have all the pineapple you want.
No. I don't do that because then sometimes the pineapple will lean over and touch your side, and you ruin two pieces.
Oh,
It's not ruining pizza. Pineapple
they'll get two
belongs with
pizzas.
real.
Yeah, so I can smack the one with the pineapple on the ground and still have a pizza to eat.
Carlos, you got kind of a come over thing going. Don't lie.
Have a what?
No, but no,
You
wait,
have kind of a-
stop.
you
No,
have kind of a
Chris,
come over.
Chris, you have the Texas one though, and you know it.
Frat boy, the Texas frat
It's
boy
like it
come
looks
over.
like it almost looks like it's like a we call them a toupee, but it's not. It just hangs though. It hangs over and usually like over an eye or over half of both the eyes. It's the weirdest thing, and when they nod yes, it nods yes too.
I have
guess you
really
could say-
thick hair.
I guess you can say I'm a bit of a bear.
I have
I'm
thick
big.
hair. Carlos has thick hair too, so he's kind of like comparing himself to myself. So
You guys are like
whatever
brothers.
he says,
Dude,
basically
all
like
I can say is I'm twice the man you are in size.
I say 2.7.
you're right. You're right, Carlos. I don't weigh that much.
It's all right. It's going down though. Thanks to your advice earlier.
I would never roll with Carlos because he would get me down. He would just lay on top of me, and I couldn't do anything.
Then you
That's
need
right,
to learn how to
baby.
sweep. You need to learn how to sweep.
No, that much weight, it can't be done.
Hey, all jokes aside, that was my first experience with jiu-jitsu. They put me to roll with another guy that was his first time also, and then he got on top of me. I just started tapping. I was like, I'm done. I'm done.
Hey, Chris, I'm gonna give you a good tip right now. Never in your life try to use butterfly guard with the big guy. It doesn't work. It hurts your knees.
You will go from regular hips to childbearing hips.
You need to put your foot in their thigh. Don't butterfly.
Hey guys, hey Sean, I gotta go. I just want to join. I only had a few minutes, but I just want to say happy New Year to everybody.
You too,
Man,
Chris.
Listen, I'm 100% whole cow milk. Okay, let's get it straight.
He likes the D.
Hey,
How do you get that from me liking cows, bro?
Vitamin
D.
D.
Vitamin D.
Vitamin dick.
Carlo, you sure you don't drink, bro?
I can only imagine there's people like Barney and the others who are what's going on here, listening to this. Is
What
Barney
you
on, by the way?
realize?
He was.
Is Barney on?
No, not yet.
Oh,
He
he's not
usually
here.
strolls through, and I think it's
Oh,
not
right.
his time. He usually comes on when I'm later.
Well, listen, Carlos, you and Jose and those guys, y'all can't do an all Spanish show. That's racist.
Yeah. What's up with that? Hey,
Why
I'm gonna
not,
tell you right
baby?
now, Carlos. If I'm gonna join, and you have to translate everything, that's messed up. That's gonna
All
be
right,
like
guys.
his. Have a good one, Chris.
Peace out.
Happy New Year, Chris.
Happy New Year.
That's gonna be like Jose's worst stream ever. I don't think, like, just like
Why
four
you
of you
saying
guys.
that?
There's like 4 Spanish-speaking people on YouTube.
No, I'm sure there's probably
I
more.
tell you what I should do. What I should do is go to his Discord and then just narrate in English what's going on.
You should.
On the.
But you can make it anything you want because I don't know Spanish.
I know that's the fun part of it.
I literally only know the words to listen out for on a construction site.
I'll be over there going like, all right, so Earth is here, so Flat just joined, and he said he wants to hump the moon. I don't what.
But he would say that in English.
Yeah, he would say that. Yeah.
That's
I can mangle a cover of La Bamba.
Oh, okay, and he said something about putting feces in the beans. Hang on, is that right?
the hell?
Cross-reference.
I've heard him talk about that before, actually.
Caca de frijoles. Yeah, he said that.
Yeah,
You've heard him talk. You've heard him talk, right? Like normal.
Yeah.
Yeah, he don't even sound like that. It's weird. I give him. Hey, I'm gonna tell you now. I hate the guy. He won't be on my. I literally booted him from this server because I no longer will talk that.
Oh yeah,
and
I can't
He doesn't
stand
have anything else, and he's the worst.
But anyway, I wanted to ask Chris, but he left, about his experience at the convention meeting George and Thompson. But I haven't heard that.
I think he said George was cool to him. I know that I don't think they got him to do anything.
He was happy to meet his other soy boy friend Nathan Thompson.
Any issues that somebody would have with George, any reasonable person, is they're going to be petty things like he's long-winded and I don't know. Yeah, long-winded.
Yeah, he is definitely long-winded, but it's okay though.
Yeah, but
I said this to him the other night because we had a conversation. I told him, I said you're long-winded as fuck, but a lot of people don't understand that the things that you're explaining are long-winded explanations to be able to explain them.
yeah, he does a great job of explaining stuff that I could never explain. And half the stuff he talks about, I don't understand, but once he says it, it makes perfect sense.
Oh, George?
So, yeah, talking about George. Yeah. Nathan Thompson, though. God damn. Fucking obnoxious cunt.
He can recite useless information. Very good. Irrelevant fact. This is helium is the number one, blah 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 on the what's it called? See, I can't even say it. On the periodic table, blah blah blah. Value is this. Yet he thinks that it's inside of rockets.
Oh.
I think I just made more sense right now rambling than here.
Slick says you guys are all programmed.
What time? Of course he did. What time does the liquor store close today? Probably 7.
Oh my!
Aren't you already drinking? I heard those glasses clinging.
No, I'm not drinking. I'm debating whether or not to drink. I just know that I don't have long to make a decision.
Oh,
Well,
oh yeah, I forget
you
you're on the
know they
East
sell
Coast.
soy milk 24/7 though, right?
Carlos,
You know they say
it
they
kind of scares
sell
me that
soy
you
milk
talk
24.
soy boys so much. Like you like them or something. Is that your type? Are you a bear?
I'm a bear, man. I'm a I'm a Benjamin Bear.
Oh God, that guy, he bothers me too.
Dude, that's some entertaining stuff sometimes. I will go watch him because surprisingly I agree with some of the stuff that he says, but then every once in a while he'll just go on some tangent and I'm like, okay, I'm done. But when when he talks about he was talking about how Mozart was gay and then Beethoven was a man's man, and then he was comparing. It was hilarious.
He's writing a book about wizards and how to recognize them or something like that.
They wear pointy hats.
Yeah, they wear hats.
Yeah, they're
small hats. Small.
Yeah, they're easy to spot.
Pointy. Yeah.
You got those black robes and pointy hats. No, wait a minute.
Exactly. Well, the robe could be any color.
Yeah.
You guys don't like Owen Benjamin? Seriously?
No.
I like him for the most part, but he's a little wacko when it comes to certain things.
Oh, just
Owen
certain
Benjamin,
things.
all-American boy. Come on, guys.
Oh, I gotta like someone just because they're American?
Look,
I'm just joking.
The fact that he calls any other older female transgender or man, I mean, come on, dude.
Okay, he has some weird comedy, but the stuff he says, I mean, you can't disagree with that.
Yeah,
Family, love, farm.
Oh, yeah.
Come on.
Oh yeah. That a lot of that stuff. Yeah, I agree with him, but he just goes to some tangents, about how like Jimmy Kimmel, Jimmy Fallon is gay because of this, that, and the other, and all the artists are married to.
He's funny, has a strange sense of humor.
No, I laugh every time I listen to it. I can't argue with you about that. I watched the whole Flat Earth performance, the performance he gave at the Flat Earth conference, and when he started doing improv with the keyboard, oh dude, I'd laugh my butt off. That was hilarious.
Wow, I did not find that funny at all.
Whenever he was doing the improv with the keyboard.
Yeah, I found that his entire performance, it was either cringy or weird. I didn't laugh a single time.
No, it was weird. No, well, from a musician's point of view, the fact that he was able to do all these riffs of all these different songs with all the sounds he was going through with the keyboard, that was fun. But that's probably.
I agree, Carlos. Shout out to Owen Benjamin, man.
Shout out to the bear.
Shout out to the Holocaust denier.
I don't know about that.
Anti-Semite. Really? He's famous.
Oh,
yeah.
Really? I haven't.
Yeah.
That's why they threw him out of YouTube.
Yeah.
Did you pay attention to his performance? His performance was rife with that shit.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, I guess so. Yeah, I don't agree. I don't know enough about that to tell you my opinion. So.
I mean, it's not that big of a deal. He's his own man. He can believe whatever he wants. But I just.
It is very sad that these people are just kicking him off YouTube. I'm like, what happened to freedom of speech? But.
Well, YouTube is not the government. They don't. Right. They have no obligation.
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. But they claim that they are, whatever. But I agree. YouTube can do whatever the heck they want. It's a private company. But when they are claiming to be a certain thing, they're not. Like, what is this? Just disingenuous? I don't think it's government control or anything. I just think it's a lot of people that are in control that have their own agenda, and of course they want to silence certain things. But
never said they were a platform for freedom of speech.
Yeah.
Well, right.
And that's why they have TOS.
Right. I'm just saying that they're like, well, we try to be inclusive, this, that, or whatever. But at the end of the day, hey, they can do whatever they want. I agree. But it's obvious that their agenda is to go a certain way, and hey, rightfully so. It's a private company.
She testified in Congress. She said it clear out.
Who did? Who's this?
The CEO of YouTube. Didn't she testify in Congress that she will curtail this kind of stuff?
Oh, I don't know about that. Yeah.
Anyway, it is what it is.
I mean, I think it's a smart move for them to do that. It's going to save their reputation in the long run, I believe, and from what it otherwise might be. Although I think it's easy for a company like this, a platform like YouTube, to oversteer into the wrong direction and turn into something that's too cookie cutter.
Well, just like Owen Benjamin said, if you don't like a certain thing, just go and make your own thing, and that's what they went and did. They got D Live and the uncensored, whatchamacallit. So good for.
It's always the dark web.
So was 4chan, right?
Man, 4chan. Yeah.
There's always Pornhub.
Ew.
I don't see how that.
Hey, Monter.
There are seriously like 3 flat earthers who post videos on Pornhub.
Flurf porn.
Really? Send me a link.
Don't. Oh my God.
For research purposes. They always say do your own research.
God.
I mean, isn't that how Orphan Red got her start? Wasn't she doing basically softcore porn on?
Soft?
Yeah, she just sit around in like her lingerie reading bedtime stories in a little ASMR sexy voice or something is what.
Oh, Lord have mercy.
I hate her voice. Yeah.
Orphan Blue, yeah, Davros, that's it. Yeah, I don't know. I found out like just recently, but
Yeah, Orphan Red's voice is one of the leading causes of erectile dysfunction.
And suicide.
And suicide.
Yeah.
Most annoying.
It's quite funny because the YouTube audio is about 2 minutes behind our audio. So you can go and type in the chat like 2 minutes before it comes up.
Really smart doing that, can't you?
Yes, I feel like Nathan Thompson. Oh, that guy's deleted his channel, by the way.
No.
That's what Wally said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
he deleted it on Christmas Eve.
Oh, so he has deleted.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. Yeah, okay.
My highlight of this year was the fact that Wolfie dropped a comment on my video. That's pretty cool. Thanks to Bob the Science Guy.
Wolfie reads a lot of stuff.
Oh yeah.
I think Wolfie's a volcano because he's lying dormant for a while.
Yeah.
He sent me £50. I won his competition and he sent it to me.
Oh really?
Kept his word.
What was the competition?
He filmed a transit of the ISS across the moon, the lunar transit, and he asked us to guess exactly where he was.
Oh, that's awesome.
He was in Australia, obviously, even though he lives there, but he was about 2,500 miles from. So he did send it to me.
The biggest problems with flat earthers.
Orphan Blue, especially she's got big blue veins on her breasts and that. They look horrible.
All right, I'm gonna go find something to drink. I'll be back.
Lewis, you haven't got much time, mate. They close at 7.
Well, it's 5, so.
Oh, you got a couple of hours then.
Yeah. I'm gonna go get ready.
Happy New Year, Lewis, if you don't see you again.
I probably will. Probably see you later tonight. I'm probably going to stay up till midnight, so we'll see.
Yeah, my New Year is an hour and 7 minutes away.
Only an hour and 7 minutes. Wow. Okay, you haven't got long.
Not long, no. I've got some beer. I went and got it at like 5 o'clock, like you are doing.
All right.
My bad, guys. I was eating. Gotta get my nutrients.
That's a good idea. I should eat too.
Yeah, especially if you plan on drinking, Lewis.
Get yourself a pint, Lewis, and some beer at the same time. Or pasty or whatever.
Get a pint and some beer too.
No, a pie. Sorry, pie.
Oh, okay. All right. I got you.
Like a sausage roll or Cornish pasty.
Yeah, that sounds good.
What is
all right, I'll be back.
There you go, Carlos. The link is in the bunker to Flat Earthers on porn.
No,
God damn it.
I was joking, bro.
You got like 3 seconds to grab that before I delete it. Dirty.
He actually put a picture in there?
Yeah, he put a link.
I bet you it wasn't actually porn, though.
It was. It said Pornhub.
Right, but they're going to Pornhub and producing content, but it's not porn. They're just re-uploading their Flurf videos that they got deleted off of YouTube, was my understanding.
I guess we won't find out.
Because it's free. It's free.
That is a
storage.
40 where is evidence of a flat Earth.
By the way, that picture of her, I'm sure her waist is not that size, but that's just me talking.
What do you call those things?
Big lady?
No. Corsets. Corset.
Oh, is that what it is?
Mhm.
Look at me. Listen to them, their own culture.
Yeah, don't listen to him.
Nicole says it's pronounced.
It's pronounced better connection.
It's pronounced high-speed internet.
Being
No
so
clue what you
large,
said,
it
Crash.
obviously understands gravity.
Davros, no one believes you live in the future. It's still 2019.
You're in the past, foreigner.
Davros, do y'all have jetpacks yet?
The Mandalorian does.
I know, but I'm talking to someone who lives in the future, so I want to know if they have.
Why the heck is there a picture of Crash's nipple on this thing? I just happened to scroll up.
Thank Nicole.
Because if you've got a picture of Crash's nipple, you're not going to post it. I mean, come on.
Crash,
For the record, Sean, Crash posted that picture all by himself. I had nothing to do with it.
Crash got some.
It was a sexy
issues.
selfie he was sending us.
Crash, you being nipple.
I'm showing everyone your nipple.
He seems to think the eyeball rock.
There you go. There you guys go. New Year's.
Does
Happy
he
New
rock
Year's.
your eyeball? Does he rock your eyeballs?
Excuse you?
But I don't even know what that means. I'm just hearing it myself for the first time too. I just open my mouth and just comes.
Usually chicks dig 2 eyeballs, not just the one.
Gar. That's saying the pirates.
That one just looks like it's staring at you. It's weird. Looks like you got something in your eye, hair or something.
It looks like Mike Wazowski drinks some Red Bull. and an anime episode.
What's your point?
The point is that it looks like Mike Wazowski. It's not bad. I like.
Oh, don't backpedal.
So does that make him Sully?
Yeah, Sully's got a tattoo of Mike Wazowski in his chest.
You should get the letter I tattooed on your chest. Yeah, Slick. Lewis is old enough to drink, though he does not look it.
I told y'all if we raised enough money, I'd have that tattoo covered up live stream with whatever you guys voted.
How much?
I don't know. It depends on what you're thinking to cover it up with.
A pony would have. Never mind. I can't say that on here. Wow. Ooh. I almost slipped. Oh man, I'll message you what I was gonna say.
For the record, for anybody thinking about coming up with something to cover it up with, it has to be tasteful enough for me to look at daily.
Okay, then don't read my message.
Don't ask these guys.
Just delete that message. Don't even read it.
Does anyone know how old Lewis is?
I think Lewis is late 20s.
He's old enough to buy soy milk.
I was guessing 24.
I think he's 26 ish. I don't know.
For a second, I thought it was Cautious's old lady.
What about
I was
Craft's old lady?
Yeah, speak up, Carlos. You said something. That was you, Carlos. Say something.
Don't speak in Spanish. Senor.
See.
He's very quiet, mate.
My Little Pony.
I heard that.
Well, My Little Pony's similar to, Sean's idea, but that's not going to happen either.
Yeah, I thought I had a great idea, but it doesn't meet your criteria.
Carlos, you need to get Arwen to launch some more balloons so you get a better signal.
Sean, if you want to look at it every day, I'll give him two of you for you to look at that every.
Nah. It would have worked before the criteria. You gave us criteria, but now it wouldn't work. I don't. It's definitely not family friendly. Wow, no name.
In America,
I don't even know if I should repeat what you just said in the chat.
Hello?
What you typed in the Discord is kind of odd reading it. It's like you're requesting it or something.
Who are you talking to? Sorry.
No name.
Oh, okay.
Oh, what about it now?
Read it. Read what you put.
Oh, a tasteful
penis?
Yeah, it looks like you're asking for it.
Well, I mean, it was in response to what Nicole was saying about it has to be tasteful, whatever you put on there, and I thought, a tasteful penis? Penises can be drawn tastefully, okay, Nicole?
When you say tastefully, it sounds so odd.
I have 4
Especially
kids
from
at
a
the age
man.
of 6.
Well, I didn't say tasty. I said tastefully. There's a
Tasteful.
penis nuance.
We figured a lot out about you. You have no name, but we know how you feel.
Yes, that penises can be drawn tastefully. Yes.
Like drawn like a gun, or like drawn like drawing.
Gotta like a drawing, I guess.
Let's try to clarify or see where you stand.
I was thinking kind of like if Da Vinci did it, like a nice, just a tastefully well done.
Stop saying tasteful.
I'm just doing it to get under your skin, Sean.
Ah, jeez.
I don't want to explain what a penis is to my 6-year-old right now.
Fair.
Just put dicks all over your forehead.
Don't you already have that covered, Sean?
Huh? I don't know. There's nothing on my forehead. I would never. I love my body.
Crash says he loves his too.
I don't know. He's got an eye on his chest.
It's Mike Wazowski.
I don't know what that means.
That's the character out of Monsters Inc., dude. The little green-eyed, one-eyed.
That doesn't help his case.
Yeah, Blue Marble Science. I watched your most popular video today. That guy video that you called This Guy. I enjoyed it thoroughly. Thank you.
This is gonna be a long night. I can already tell. I'm gonna do it.
My mic was on, and it wasn't.
No.
No, I'm glad. I'm glad you enjoyed it, Sky.
Well, thank you. Did you watch my video of flying over the Celtic Sea?
Yeah, I did.
I did go down to about 5 feet at one point. Not the whole 19 miles over the sea, obviously.
Are you flying again, Skyfly?
I've been flying since I was 88. So
well, I mean,
when I was really young.
Wasn't there like a break where you weren't flying so much?
I stopped this year in January, but I have been up a couple of times this year.
Okay, yeah, that's what I meant.
With my friends. No, the hangar fees got too expensive. I just couldn't afford to keep it longer.
Yeah, but you were talking about getting another one again, right?
Well, I'm thinking about it, but there's nowhere locally where I can afford to keep one. They're very expensive to keep. They're expensive to run.
Yeah, you don't have the option of leaving one of those sitting outside.
Okay. Oh yeah, because be exposed to everything.
Can't do that.
Plus, the company that makes them in the UK, called P&M Aviation, they went bankrupt earlier this year, and at the moment you can't get spares for them. So if you have a little hard landing and you bent a couple of bars, then you wouldn't be able to get replacements. So you'd be knackered anyway.
I'd like to learn to fly. I just don't want to learn to fly.
Oh, it's great fun. It's just well, I've done it for like over 30 years. It didn't change much. Just got very expensive. It started off, reasonable, and it was all like 2-stroke engines back then that used to break down and conk out, and you had to land without the engine. And then they introduced the Rotax 912 engine, which is amazing, but it costs hundreds. Well, not hundreds. It costs a lot of thousands of pounds to buy it. It becomes too expensive for the Joe public like me and you.
Okay, yeah.
Stupid money.
You guys?
How about those ultralights? Are those affordable?
Do you guys think the prices will go down if they, say flying cars and in just the years? Are they going to go? The price going to go down, or is it going to go up on those personal flight type crafts?
No, it always goes up. I've noticed that it always goes up. And if you think about like British Airways and that, they have to buy these big jumbo jets, the 747 or whatever. They cost so many £1 million to buy, and the fuel to run them, and the amount of passengers they ship each day, they couldn't physically make a profit. So it's subsidised. It's subsidised by the government. They couldn't physically make a profit from an airline. No, like Freddie Lake went bankrupt back in the 70s, didn't he, in the UK? Obviously, a big company like Virgin or British Airways now, or Thai Airways, they don't just do airplanes. They do other business as well. So they subsidise that business with a different business. My friend's a pilot. He flies across to America every day, and he gets £110,000 a year wages just to fly the aircraft.
Do pilots like that? Do they not go home for days on end, or they just go home every night, like fly there and fly back?
No, they have to stay in hotels in different parts of the world because you're only allowed to fly for 8 hours.
Yeah, that's what I was just about to ask.
So when you got like the long distance ones that go from like the UK to Australia, which is I think 13 hours, you have 2 pilots plus the co-pilot. And maybe a second co-pilot. I don't know. There probably would be, yeah. I think that's why they stop off at different places to pick up other passengers and refuel sometimes. Because obviously them wings can't carry all that fuel, according to Poncho.
Well, they don't carry.
They run uncompressed. Yeah, they run uncompressed.
That was so. I remember that. That was amazing. It was like I did like the little calculations on it and shit, and it comes out to you would need a compressor. The tank would have to be 2/3 the size of a plane to fill up and keep itself enough pressure to take off. We're not even talking flying.
Oh yeah, if you were gonna fly it, somebody did a calculation, and that thing was as big as the fuel tank on a damn space shuttle. It was ridiculous.
It's really ridiculous because they make solar power. There's a solar power plane that had flown around the world, which means obviously it didn't need to stop for fuel. Thing is that the wingspan was like almost 200 feet, I think, and the payload is shit. Now you're talking a commercial airliner. It's a whole different animal. I remember.
Oh yeah. The power to weight ratio for that is ridiculous.
I remember trying to explain to somebody that it was somebody who was like, yeah, the turbines, they all work it like as they say they do, but they're able to get more air through it. I'm like, how? Like with an engine. I'm like, that needs fuel. A second, everything about a turbine is the explosion of fuel. It didn't last long, luckily. I was very happy about that.
Yeah, me too. It only lasted like about 3 months, didn't it, on the YouTube?
When you talk to people that seriously believe that, you're discussing something with a person who's not even smart enough to chew a crayon.
They still think that they don't use as much fuel today.
So would that mean that Quantum Eraser uses the crayon munching thing as because he's jealous? Is that what you're saying?
I don't think. Yeah, I think Quantum Eraser has to do some study to get up to the level of crayon munching.
He's still
yeah.
I
think they give QE those non-toxic markers. Is what they do.
I'm going to rename him Quantum No Balls.
Yeah, I used to go on the Poncho Pete show every day, and they were generally talking about the flat Earth. And when Poncho Pete came out with the fact that aircraft run on compressed air, I completely told him he was a complete idiot. And you know what he's like, and he's not easy to talk to. And then, like a month after that, I already pulled out of it because I just got fed up. He started on about the trannies and that, and I thought, this is ridiculous. You might remember that about a year ago, actually. Yes, a year ago.
What did he say about trains?
Oh, he was saying that Bruce Lee was a woman, and almost every other man was a woman, and all of his friends.
Trannies. Oh, my bad. I thought you were saying trains. Okay, no, that's.
Sorry, it must be my accent. Sorry.
Oh, I hear in Southern. It's all good.
Yeah, you can sing, but you can't listen.
Exactly.
Oh, he's on a phone call. Sean's on a phone.
What is? I have noticed that there does seem to be a big fascination with transsexuals or transvestites in the flat Earth community. What's up with that?
It's been going on since what first started back in 2015, really.
I came in all this late, so I didn't know that.
Yeah, if you go to certain channels, you can find old videos. What's it called? Saint Chan Chow or something. I can't remember what it's called now. That's where Poncho Pete came from. And they were talking about trannies, and they were talking about drinking piss and stuff like that. All strange. And the flat Earth just revolted basically from that, and then escalated. And then all of a sudden, you got like Patricia Steer and Mark Sargent coming out, and Eric DeBay around 2015, that sort of time scale.
The first time I ran into it was with old Russian vids calling every woman a transvestite, and I just couldn't figure it out. Like what I thought it was just him, but the more I paid attention, the more I found that a lot of flat earthers seem to be fixated on calling people trannies, and I couldn't.
Yeah, it was a strange time. I think Russian vids was. I'm not going to use the Pete Shea saying he's put in place in that, but I think he was just having fun and come up with all this nonsense, trying to promote himself to make money. But he's still there. He's still doing stuff. Actually, he copied one of my videos. I didn't even know about it. Turn the frogs back. Anyway, have I killed the?
No, I was tickled by what Davros had put in the side chat there. That was pretty funny.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I think what Jose's going to do with that Spanish, he's going to do a show in the new year on I think he said the Saturday, so whenever that is. I think it's Tuesday today, so it's Wednesday. So in a few days' time, I think that's going to be a complete disaster. There's probably going to be 3 people that might benefit from it.
Don't be hating.
Who knows? And Darkseid, I 100% agree with you.
But why are you hating?
Not hating it. I'm just saying it's going to be a disaster.
But why though?
Because the majority of people that watch him speak English and only understand English. Now, if he speaks Spanish, none of them will be able to understand it. So there's no point in them watching it. And that was my point. It would be a complete disaster.
No, man, that's the thing about Puerto Ricans and Mexicans and stuff, right? They have huge families. Hell, I'm sure if he got his family to watch, he'd have more viewers than normal. I had to say that for Carlos's benefit, right?
Oh my God.
Us Irish Italians are the same way, man. We're breeders.
When you think about it, you have about 16 people per house and about 23 per van. That's a lot of subscribers.
Exactly. Just that alone right there, give him 45 viewers.
So you're saying, like in Puerto Rico, 16 people live in one little house?
No, I'm talking about here in the United States. I mean, stereotypical. Come on, man.
I don't know, because I'm not from America, UK, so I don't.
Oh yeah, no. A lot of immigrants will actually bunk together in one house that has maybe 3 bedrooms, and they'll have at least 6 to 8 different people living, and
Wow.
that's how they actually make a good money, because every month they take turns on paying the utilities and rent. So when it's not your month to pay, if it's 8 people, then 7 months out of the year, or every 7 months, you can have all that money to you, and then send it back home or save.
Okay. Yeah, I remember I used to work with a lot of what they call Polish people. They come over to the UK and they earn their money and they send it to their family over there because they can get more money here than they could get there.
Do they cram a lot of people in one car?
Yeah, there's like 12 people in one little room.
Yeah, that's exactly how it goes with that.
Yeah, 3 of them stays in a little caravan out the workplace. Well, they didn't have any washing facilities, no kitchen, nothing, no toilet,
Oh.
nothing.
Yeah, that's what happens here in the States with it undocumented. Yeah.
Yeah, and they just join like a gym or something, get a gym membership, and then go to the gym or swimming pool or something, and use the shower there.
And 8 of them living in a damn minivan.
Wow, that's freaky, isn't it?
So in other words, Jose's gonna have a lot of super chats in pesos tomorrow. I mean,
Sean's got the right idea. He says he should stream at the same time with real-time translation.
that was me that had that.
Oh, that was you? Okay. He posted it in the live chat.
Oh, he did. I was saying, like, I can go to Jose's Discord, and then I can give the interpreting on there, so you can so you can know.
I like it. I like it.
What it would be funny if you could have a way to do the automatic closed caption text speech to text, and then have somebody translate that in real time. I wonder if that would work.
You killed it, Carlos. You killed it dead.
I killed it, man.
Good job.
Good.
That's what I'm good for. Killing hangouts and putting up rules.
Those are good skills to have.
If you're illegal.
How long have you been in the States, Carlos?
Since 2008.
Oh, okay. So you got here during the bust. That was good.
The bust.
Yeah, the housing bust. The economic bust.
Oh yeah. I remember when I was.
Oh, that was rough, man.
Actually, what I had said was I was live stream you doing that. That's what I meant. Carlos.
Do what?
While Jose's doing a Spanish stream his live stream, but have the translation on mine.
Oh yeah, there you go. Yeah. That would be fun.
Brainery's over there bragging about how Europeans know multiple languages. Well, this is America. We speak American.
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 It's okay. Knowing multiple languages can't get you out of a bind. Knowing how to use duct tape and zip ties and extension cords can.
Oh, that's so scary in itself.
Oh yeah.
I don't trust them Europeans in no ways. I've seen that movie Hostel. I know what they do to Americans over there.
Real.
That was a documentary, wasn't
it? Yeah, the best kind.
We used to predict eclipses back in the day.
What was I gonna do? Trying to figure out how to do this because I'm planning on streaming the whole time, but I know I'm not gonna be able to last on the fucking mic the whole time. So I'm thinking at some point I'll do a break and just play a bunch of music.
What kind of music?
I don't know. That's what I was looking for. I can't find a stream site that I want.
I'm going to go ahead and put a request in for like a 90s alternative grunge playlist.
Yeah, no. Good luck with that.
Well, damn it, Sean. That was just my vote.
Well, you know, we can have a peer review on that. None of you will win, but hey.
Guys, I gotta roll out. I gotta go defrag my hard drive.
I don't know what you just said.
Oh, you don't want
okay.
to. You don't want to deep fry a hard drive, Carlos. That's
Defrag.
oh, defrag. Okay.
Son doesn't know. He's a freaking Zoomer.
I'm a Zoomer.
Boomer?
You're a millennial. You're a millennial.
Carlos, get yourself an iMac computer. You never have to run defrag. You never have to install drivers for a new printer or anything like that. It does it automatically.
Yeah, but what's the downside?
I mean,
The downside is they cost a shitload of money.
There you go.
So $3,000, and all of a sudden I can speak broke.
Their keyboard sucks.
No, I like the keyboard. I think it's good. The mouse is pretty shitty, but apart from that, it's good.
Hang on. What's crappy about
That was broken. Sorry, I didn't quite get it.
That was just the way he
what's crappy
speaks.
about the mouse? Broken English. I said, what's wrong with the mouse?
The battery, after you've used it for a while, the battery doesn't fit snugly, and it keeps saying the battery's flat, but it's not. You just have to put a little bit of paper under the right-hand battery if you're looking at it from the top, and lift it up, because it just wears basically on the terminal. It's a wireless mouse, obviously. It doesn't have a wire. It has batteries in there. Couple of AA batteries.
A lot of people had an issue with the rechargeable mouse because you couldn't use it while it was charging.
That's retarded.
And I think that was I think that was engineered in so you wouldn't use it while it was charging, and because if you did, it will wear out the USB hub and then actually breaking your mouse. So I just encourage you using it.
Mine doesn't have rechargeable batteries, and I don't have like a docking station I can park it in to recharge it. And it normally lasts about 2 months before they go flat.
I got you.
But it is annoying when they do go flat, and then you can't do nothing, and you've got to change the battery. Oh, that's a new one. Yes, that's a newer one. Mine's from like 2015, so it's quite old. Sorry for the people in the YouTube. Someone just posted a picture of the.
I'm sure. I'm gonna show them right now.
Yeah, the mouse for the iMac. They're pretty good because they've got no buttons on them. You just gently touch it, and there's a click. You can hear it like a little click, and you can actually rub your finger on the top of it, like stroking it, and it like scrolls.
But how often do you false click on it though?
Not very often. Once you get used to it, when you first start using it, compared to a different mouse, it's quite, it's quite weird. But it doesn't take long to get used to it. But I got a wireless keyboard as well. I don't know why, because what would hurt if there was a cable going under the desk to the back of the computer? But the good thing about the iMac is that I've only got one wire going to it, and that's the power supply. There's no other wires going to it unless I plug the printer in. But you can buy the Wi-Fi printers now.
I have a wireless keyboard. That's the stupid. I got a wireless keyboard, but my mouse is USB. But it's one of those what do you call it? The micropad mice or whatever. Fucking has like four options, or I don't know. I can change it to do stuff.
Yeah,
all I use it for is
I
hotkeys.
found these iMac mouses. They cost like £80 UK money, 80 pounds to buy a new one when they go wrong. But they don't go wrong. You just got to take them apart. But there's no screws in there. It's just glued together. So you have to really carefully piece it apart, and then just move that little terminal on the battery compartment, which goes out of line after a while for some reason. And then it works perfectly.
What's wrong with just a regular old mouse?
I went to Asda's, which is the local Walmart store in the UK, and I bought myself like a £9 wide mouse just for when this one breaks down in the future.
All mouses, you have to pull the ball out and clean it.
I didn't quite catch that, but well, is Hannah still there? Oh, Queen Hannah's there. Yeah,
she's there.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm just reading.
Are you reading the Bible?
Oh yeah.
I was thinking about the Bible today and how the sun stood still in that, and I was thinking realistically, if the sun stood still, that means the Earth stopped spinning, which means it would go from like 1,000 miles and 40 at the equator to nothing. So everything would just fly forward, wouldn't it, to the east?
Yeah. What was it? That was like one of those questions that like made me realize how shit worked. Who was it? I think it was Dr. Bob, or was it you, Blue? Someone was talking about it, and it was the idea that like to fly off, if like how fast would the Earth have to spin for us to fly off of it? And
I actually worked it out years ago, back in 2015, based on the London Eye that's spinning round, and I think it's 50 times faster than it currently is.
Well, it'd be 17,000 miles an hour.
Yeah, stupid number.
It'd be what is our exiting speed it'd take for us to fly off the Earth or some shit like that.
No, but my question was, if the Earth stopped spinning like it did in the Bible, apparently,
in the Bible,
the Earth stopped spinning because the sun stood still, and the only way the sun could stand still is if the Earth stopped spinning. From my mind, from my point of view,
the Earth was spinning in the Bible. How come they think it's flat?
No, the Earth's a spherical shape, and it's spinning.
That, but don't they say? But in that, most of them say it's because the Bible said so. How does that work?
You keep cutting out short at the end. I don't get the rest of it.
Don't they say the Earth shape is said in the Bible, but they say it's flat or some shit?
The Bible never says it's flat. No, the only Bible book that says the Earth, it doesn't say it's flat, but the only one that indicates that is the Book of Enoch.
Oh, okay.
But then, if you look at the second Book of Enoch, you can see the inconsistencies between the first book and the second book. So you know it's a complete load of bollocks.
Oh yeah.
But in the Bible, it says that I can't. It was Samuel or something. Exactly. The Earth stopped still for a day. The sun stopped still, rather, which means that the sun's moving and it's just stopped. But we know the sun's not moving. Well, it's rotating, but it's not moving maybe it's moving in the Great Year over 24,000 years. But in like short-term reality, that would mean the Earth stopped spinning. So everything would just go east and smash into everything that's around. There'd be no life on Earth. Unless it slowed down slowly over a few days, and then that would be acceptable. But it doesn't say that, so I don't know. It's a bit confusing.
A lot confusing.
Yeah, there's lots of nonsense in the Bible.
I don't see how anyone believes it. It doesn't make sense to me at all.
It's because you haven't let Jesus plant his seed deep inside you, Sean. You got to let him plant his seed deep inside.
I don't roll like that. I can't let that happen. Sorry.
Oh, it's 23-33. That's 2 threes and a 23. That's
Conspiracy confirmed.
That would be 11-23.
Yes, I think it is. Yeah, you're right.
Trying to fix something.
Yeah, Blue Marble, tell us some stories.
Tell us about when Christ was around, Paul.
I am curious about what riding a brontosaurus was really like.
Right? I think we're honored. We have people that were around that long. You know, Terry and Blue.
Blue, did you leave us?
GPS said, shouldn't we ask him about the events before the Big Bang?
You keep cutting out, Sean.
Do I really? GPS said, shouldn't we ask about the events before the Big Bang?
Oh, I see that.
There's only 21 people watching on YouTube.
I know, because the conversation has gotten stale.
Yeah, we
And
need
half of them are in here.
It's not even funny. No,
I've actually got the watch page open, so I am actually a viewer as well.
Well, also, quite a few people went live, and usually when that happens, everyone will jump over there.
Oh, yeah, I got a half a dozen notifications a few minutes ago.
Yeah. I just want to see if I can do it. I don't need to be a chick. Like I said, I'll try playing music and shit and just hang out.
The Math Pig, Steve McRae, and Fight the Flat Earth all are live streaming.
They all sound shit to me personally.
Yeah, I can't stand any of them.
Oh,
the person I see that's live right now that I would watch is probably Vinny.
Yeah, I personally
y'all don't like Math Pig? I like him. He's funny.
Who?
No, I don't watch them personally.
Who?
Math
Any
Pig.
of those ones you just mentioned.
I don't even know who he is. Who's Math Pig?
Yeah, I don't know who that is.
Oh, I don't know. I think he's Scottish or Irish or something. He's pretty funny. He usually has, oh gosh, who is it? Richard Madsen.
Yeah,
from Scholar Fiction.
You speaking gibberish, boy.
Boy.
What sort of time scales are we all in? So Lewis was like 5:30 at 10 o'clock. So
I'm
10.
on the West Coast, so it's still 3:30 in the afternoon to me.
So
Yeah,
about
I'm
7
on
hours,
Central
roughly
Time,
difference.
5:30.
They haven't got no Australian time, have we?
On the panel, I know we have everyone in every time zone across the United States.
Because I was on the Terry Davis show yesterday. Of course, they're in Australia. They're like almost 12 hours in advance of us. That's quite fascinating. And they got a good sense of humour. I like the Australian people.
Yeah, I'm still trying to get over there.
It's 10:06 a.m.
Aaron owes
Someone.
me a plane ticket. I don't think I should have to show him a curvature.
Distal Davos. Yeah, he's in the back. Oh, he's actually on the panel. I didn't see.
He's there.
Yeah, it's on the first of the first. It's already had its New Year. It's 10 o'clock in the morning for him. Just past 6 minutes past.
He thinks he's a time traveler.
Oh, he lives in one of them stupid half an hour time zones.
No, he just thinks he's in the future.
He must be an accolade. Accolades are the only one I know in Australia. There's one in India as well. What's he type? Foreigners are futurists.
See, hey, everyone, Davros just admitted he was a foreigner. Told you. Thanks, Davros.
Oh, you doxed yourself, Davros.
Good day to you. Good day. Say hello to Wes Wally and Wolfie6020. Thank you very much. Davros, what's your favourite colour, blue?
Turquoise.
I'm struggling. We need Poncho Pete on, don't we? Someone like that. Someone really mad who can talk lots of nonsense.
Oh no, I hate nonsense.
I can
Well,
take it.
you know what I mean, but I think that's why Jose does really well.
I'm working on a diffrasionator. I'm trying to raise money for right now to break the density barrier. Once I can nail exactly what the speed of density and what vector it has, we'll be able to travel instantaneously, Brian. I just need funding.
I do know there's a guy. Yeah, I'm gonna try to find it real quick because there's a guy that maybe it's on YouTube better, that I think figured out the equation for it. Hang on.
You cut out again, Sean.
I said I think there's a guy on YouTube. I gotta find it again, but he's like, I guess, figured out how to time travel, like the equation, but I don't know. Hang on, I'll find it and then I'll play it.
What's his name, Einstein? I thought about time travel today, strangely enough, and realistically, what is time? And it's just how we've decided to divide what we consider a year from the sun being in the same position 1 year to the next year. And that's how we've defined time. So how can you physically travel back in time?
All right, I found it. Yeah, I'll play it.
You know, Superman would go around the world really fast, the opposite way from the spin, wouldn't he? To change time. But I don't think realistically that could physically work.
Oh, Brainery's saying that there's no cutting out on the YouTube stream.
It just may be my
reset my voice setting.
Yeah, it's probably my either the Discord settings, because you got to remember, you guys hear me in the Discord, but my audio is going through my OBS to YouTube.
Oh.
Yeah, and then right now I'm gonna play that video. This is the where the hell is it? This is the guy. I guess this guy has figured out the equation for time travel.
Yeah, you cut
And
out
his
again.
time machine kind of looks like a certain
This is on
DeLorean,
this YouTube,
whose
so
parts
let's go
you
watch
can
it, yeah.
actually buy. Vsauce, Kevin here. This is Mindblow.
I'm
Time
using
travel
his.
edition. This is a real time
Excuse me.
machine.
Open the volume
sort
in
of.
there. One sec.
Dr. Ronald Mallett's time machine is a spiral of incredibly powerful lasers, and he wishes to send a particle down it on a space-time altering ride into the past. Unfortunately, it hasn't worked out yet, and no visitors from the future have arrived. Isaac Newton thought time was like an arrow flying in a straight line. Albert Einstein, however, thought of it like a river, flowing around stars, speeding up and slowing down. In fact, he theorized the rate at which time passes depends on how fast you're going. So someone orbiting the Earth with the speed of light would actually alter time-space, and when they return to Earth, they will be in the future. His theory was right. Satellites orbiting the Earth actually have to alter their clocks to synchronize with Earth time because of this scientific fact. Check out this clock example. Hold it still and the clock ticks at a normal pace. Move the clock and the ticks take longer. Therefore, if you were in a ship aboard the green orb, your space-time would be different from the time of the guy holding the clock. Unfortunately, we can't go nearly fast enough in spaceships to make a noticeable time change. But we could hop a ride on the Black Hole Express. Spinning us at incredible speeds like this coffee spins this bean, we'd surely end up in a different time. But no one seems to have a black hole handy, so instead Stephen Hawking has worms. Wormholes to be exact. These are tunnels connecting massive distances by bending space-time. Like two holes on a piece of paper being folded together. Wormholes exist in a teeny tiny place called quantum foam, and we have no idea how to enlarge them enough for a human to pass through, let alone a TARDIS. The grandfather paradox arises when you travel into the past and kill your grandfather. thereby never being born and never being able to travel into the past to kill your grandfather. David Deutsch believes parallel universes exist, so you could go back in time to an alternate world without affecting the one you came from. In which case, you could go back and shoot a dinosaur in the face and your grandpa will be fine. Finally, to check out an iconic time-traveling show, watch the new season premiere of Doctor Who, Saturday, April 23rd at 9/8 Central on BBC America. I'm gonna leave you with a riddle.
I'll try to find a better one. It's one of these guys. Hang on.
Yeah, Vsauce doesn't normally do woo.
No, it was the guy that was showing you that badass looking clock thing he was showing. Oh, here it is. Perfect. All right, this is it right here. This is the one I'm talking about.
Ever since Ron Mallett was a boy, he harbored a dream of building a time machine. Today, he is professor of physics at the University of Connecticut and is ready to share his secret with the world.
It's really such a powerful feeling to know that
you really got to crack
manipulate
the
space
barrier.
and time. And it's exciting because this shows that we may be able to control time, and that means that ultimately we may be able to control our destiny in a way that mankind never has been able to before.
Sean doesn't care, Deborah.
Yeah, well, the fact that my coffee still turned out to look like it's caramel, I have not broken the density
Mallett's
barrier.
motivation began when his father died suddenly of a heart attack.
We got time.
Just 10 years old at the time and totally devastated, Mallett made a pledge.
If I could build a time machine, then I could go back and see him again and maybe save his life.
For almost half a century, and like many other scientists, he has conducted his research in closed laboratories.
It's only been since my own breakthrough at the end of the 20th century that I finally allowed myself to come out of the time travel closet, so to speak.
If he is right, the 21st century will see time travel make the leap from theory to reality. Mallett's early work was hidden away in the time traveler's code. He studied black holes particularly, but always kept an eye on what was happening within the time travel fraternity.
The early work of my colleagues that really inspired me was the work that had been done in rotating black holes, in wormholes, and in cosmic strings. All of these things lead to the possibility of time travel into the past. What I was interested in was a mechanism, something that could be used as a device that was different.
The common theme that unites rotating black holes, wormholes, and cosmic strings is gravity. Mallett searched to find a new way to harness gravity in order to time travel. Though light has no mass, it does have energy. Mallett was convinced that he had to take an unorthodox step to build his time machine.
And I found that light could be used to control gravity. And since gravity controls time, then that meant that I could use light to control time. And that's the basis of my inspiration and my theory.
Mallett guarded his ideas. Before announcing his theory, he had to make sure it had substance. He wanted to find a way to replicate the frame dragging of a black hole in order to twist space-time around into a loop. The answer was staring him in the face.
And I thought, wait a minute, if I can create the circulating beam of light, then this circulating beam of light can lead to a twisting of space, should lead to a twisting of space. And if it does lead to a twisting of space, then it should also lead to a twisting of time.
For months, Mallett worked on his equations. He checked and double-checked the figures until he was ready to unveil his ideas to the world. While cosmic strings and wormholes would require an advanced super-civilization with the power of the galaxy at their fingertips, Mallett claims his time machine could be built not in the future, but today.
What you're seeing are four intersecting laser beams that are forming a square in which the light is circulating around, and the space is being dragged around by that. And in addition to the twisting of space, eventually in a real model, you'll have a twisting of time as well.
Oh, crap.
This is a model of Mallet's time machine. According to his theory, the laser beams will create enough gravity to replicate the frame dragging of a rotating black hole.
Did the string just crash?
Some claim this theory is off the wall.
Yeah,
but Mallet insists his
probably got
machine
flagged.
can create a tiny time loop.
Picked up.
The real size of the real device,
What
however,
were you
is going to
guys
be
talking
only about the width of a human
see, the
hair,
thing is,
and rather than
okay,
just
it's a
having
logical paradox
7
that none of these
lasers like
people
this
we talk
model,
about.
there'll be 10,000.
Okay, and it's called the location paradox.
Mallet is now ready to step from model to time machine.
It was a Nat Geo stream.
The time traveler in
If you
his
travel back
miniature
in
machine
time, the
will be a
planet will not
subatomic
be where you
particle.
started from.
Think if we could warn ourselves.
Exactly.
of
You
future
can't really go back
catastrophes.
to the exact
We
point.
don't need to send someone back. If we could just send information back,